Just it. Five, four, three, two, one. We're live. I'm officially excited to open the youth conference of COP26. Over to you, Theo.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. We have over 20 speakers, and they're all young people speaking today from loads of different organisations. Before I get into it, can all the young people say, yeah? Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Woo!
Yeah.
Allow it. But yeah, today we are gathered today for something which, all jokes aside, is absolutely important. Seriously important. We are a generation who weighs more on the side of our future. Not just because we're going to live it, but because we have experience internationally. We are so connected more than ever on our phones that we care about people from all over the globe. Sometimes it's easy to forget people which are sitting in the other side of the world just because you don't see them. I think young people, we have a special force behind us. We have that level of empathy and connectivity, as well as a bigger care for the future for that reason. So today we've gathered to talk about our own unique bespoke issues that we will round the table. Everything here that will be discussed at this event, once it's voted on, and Ahmed will put up the polls, and I'll explain how it's going to work in a bit. We'll then go onto an open letter signed by as many young people, we're aiming for over 25,000, and I'll go straight to the negotiation team. So what you're saying here will become reality. So if you say the right things, who knows? It could be saving people's lives in the future. And we've done that before, right? Look at what Marcus Rashford did last year. Look at the zip cards in London. Young people can go so far when they campaign, and this is just one of those instances. So this is third victory in the last year for young people. And without further ado, I want to pass it over to somebody which has made this happen, just to basically tell us why we're here today, and as well as telling us how he's made that happen. Is Charles on the call by any chance?
No, Charles, come on. He is here. Charles, switch your...
I think he's an attendee. I think he needs to be promoted.
That's it. We need to promote Charles.
See? They say young people who do that tech. Not for long. Not till I come along. But Charles should be here now.
Where is he? Should we do a poll while we're waiting?
Yeah, go on then.
Harry, I need you to start the camera.
All right. Whoever's hosting, we need to make the panel full.
Uh-huh. Okay, try that now.
Okay, still can't start the video.
All right.
There you go.
Hey, there he is.
Okay. Great to see you, everybody. Thanks to everybody for joining this webinar. Thank you, Theo, for the intro. So my name is Charles Appleby. I'm the founder of No CO2, which is the sponsor of this webinar today. I'd like just to tell you how this came about, which is that back in last year, 2020, I met Theo at an online event. I was so impressed with Theo that I thought, well, we've got to keep in contact. And so we ended up inviting Theo to bring along a couple of colleagues to a webinar that we ran in January. And Gary and I, working together, were so impressed with the three of you that we decided the logical thing to do was to offer this same platform that we've been using to a bigger group of people. And you're here today. So there's 20 speakers. So one went to 3 speakers, today to 20 speakers. So next time, where might we be in terms of numbers of speakers? So just to tell you a little bit about No CO2, more and more people now are concerned about global warming. In fact, people are very concerned. We all need to cut our fossil fuels. But after we've done that, what next? So at No CO2, we make it easy for people to take action by planting trees. So planting trees is a triple win. It removes our CO2 emissions, it creates paid work for families in extreme poverty to plant the trees, and it creates new habitats for wildlife. So that's it, that's why we all need to take action and plant trees. So back over to Theo and the rest of you. Let's have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Theo, I think you're on mute.
I think he's on mute.
I was on mute, talking to myself. Brilliant. But no, Charles, thank you so much. It's amazing to have you here, and we are now here today because of the hard work which has gone behind the scenes by Charles and also Gary, who's there.
Oh, come on, Theo. You've put in so much work into this. So the next couple of hours, I'm really going to get comfortable. I've got my cup of tea, and I'm ready to engage.
Brilliant. So today we've had some amazing speakers going on. We're going to have the Youth Climate Association for Northern Ireland. Then after that we have NCAP, which have talking about so we have in Northern Ireland talking about agricultural issues and rural areas and what that is like, as well as devolved issues for young people. We then have cities, climate change in cities by NCAP Youth. Then followed straight in the after we have news to reuse, taking an international perspective. So we're going all over the country here. And then straight after that, we have the British Youth Council. We're looking at youth consultation. One of the reasons why we're here today, to get young people talking around this table why their voices are important. Then straight after that, we have Richmond and Kingston, who's going to talk about how we can slowly and carefully travel to that greener future. Understanding what can go wrong along the way and why we need to act quickly. Then followed straight after that, to finish it all off, we have Teach for Future, which is basically talking about education and how we can make sure that the next leaders, people like us, are as active as we are. So that's what's going to be happening today. There's going to be 15 minutes of presentation, and then this is where we're going to need you. We're going to have 10 minutes of speaking. So you can put up your hand and respond to the points that has been said in someone's panel. Each group will present their ideas, things that they think should be at the table at COP26. Those we put in the forms of pledges, and you can vote on them. However, this 10 minutes is a chance for you to put your hand up, be selected by the host, come and give your speech, come and give your thoughts, and tell us what we should or should not vote for the motions which we have put forward. Now, we want this to be a bit saucy, as well as we want this to actually be real and representative of what we think. So don't feel afraid to disagree. You have 1.5 minutes, that's 1 minute and 30 seconds to give your point. After that, the host will come in, cut you off, and say, sorry, you've given an amazing point, we have to stop there. So that's what's going to happen today. After that, you're going to vote on it, and we're going to do that 6 times today to make that phenomenal letter. Right? So you need to be here throughout to make sure that you are actually making sure that your stamp will be on that letter. Because if you weren't here and the motion passed that you don't want to pass, then you should have been it. And you could be representing young people today. So that's the point of it. Brilliant. So without further ado, I'd like to talk about the hashtag. Everyone here has Twitter, right? What I'm going to let you do, there's a chat function, right? Put your Twitter handles in that chat function. We have a chat function. We have a Twitter account. Charles has an amazing No CO2 Twitter account. Go follow us out. Go check it out. But we will follow you back if you put your handles in. There you go. I can see it already. If you put it there, you're going to get followers. You want to increase that ratio? Put it in the chat. We're using a hashtag today. Hashtag see-through plastic. If one of the members could put that in the chat, the hashtag. Tweet with this hashtags, and there'll be some prize later on today. Now, the prize is that Charles obviously does loads with trees. Who wants here trees planted in their names? In Madagascar, of all countries, right? If you use that hashtag later on during the event, we will choose people at random to have trees donated in their name to A, help climate change, B, be in the wonderful country of Madagascar and give so many jobs to the locals. So, without further ado, I'd like to pass on to our first speakers. This has been amazing, it's been absolutely phenomenal knowing you. Enjoy the event. I'll keep popping up, but this is the end of me. Lashini, are you there? Lashini, how are you doing?
I'm here. I'm feeling fantastic. I'm so excited for today. I'm really excited to make change. If you're excited as me, I'd love you to put a little smiley face in the chat. So I want to see how many of you are excited as me. Okay, so I'm Lashini. I'm the member of Youth Parliament for Brent, and I will be hosting our first session. And as I've said, I'm really excited to create change, but I'm really also excited to hear from our first guest. So we're going to hear from Youth Climate Association from Northern Ireland. They are the biggest youth climate organisation representing Northern Ireland, and they've been calling for a list of demands very actively with climate strikes all over Northern Ireland, in Derry, in Belfast, and they've had really successful petitions. If you want, I'd really recommend you check out the website. I've done it before. They have an amazing blog. I actually read all their posts today. It was fantastic. So without further ado, can we give it up for Youth Climate Association Northern Ireland?
Oh, where are they? Are they here? Oh, we're getting to share the screen. Brilliant. Alright, it's absolutely awesome.
Oh, or are you on mute?
Yes, we got you now. Sorry, you must have been on mute.
I got orange just by emphasis there. I think he's just trying to get set it up. Technical difficulties as per usual.
Yeah, so hello everyone, my name is Oren McAllister. I am the Youth Parliament candidate for Newry Internet. So I will just be going through our points today on legislation, and I will be presenting our pledges and proposals. Then secondly, Ali Joe, who is also the candidate for Youth Parliament for the constituency of Foyle in Northern Ireland, will be talking about the points for cheap and accessible public transport and carbon dependency. Then we will have Anna from Fridays for Future, who will be talking about air quality, agriculture. We will then have Georgia presenting our final points on forestry, sea levels and biodiversity, so I'm going to pass it on to Ellie Jo now.
Well, hello. Just want to change the slide there. I have experience in it as well too. We have long-standing issues accessing public transport, which makes us so car dependent. And if we're going to battle climate change to its fullest, we need to completely change that. We need a complete overhaul. In Northern Ireland, regional inequality is a major factor. This led to people that want to access more environmentally sustainable transport, they can't because they don't have the resources. They are forced into using cars. And I want that to change. All of us want that to change. If we're going to give insight into this regional inequality, east of the River Bann has 51 train stations, west of the River Bann has 3. If you just look at amid 1 down the bottom of the screen there, you can see entire counties are left out, or portions of counties. That blue line you see is our entire railway network. It's shockingly empty, as you can probably see, and just those dots there, they're all our train stations, with the major hub being in our largest city, Belfast. But up at the top there you can see Derry, our second largest city, only has access to 1 train station. That's 100,000 people with only access to 1 train station, and if that, a not very well connected one. To battle this, we need to create more public transport, accessible public transport, and to give insight into our car dependency. In 2014, 34% of cars in the north had access to 2 or more cars, showing that this is an unacceptable level. And accessibility isn't our only deterrent, it is cost. Our costs for public transport are almost extortionate, and people can't afford it. Unfortunately, it is cheaper to travel by a car, rather than getting multiple bus journeys, paying multiple fares just to get to your destination. We need to be combating this to our fullest. To even give insight here about, us and you, and how it might be a bit different on our public transport. In between 2004 and 2015, on average, per head per year, only £22 was spent on public transport. In England, this was £110, and over in Switzerland, when converted, it was £290. We clearly aren't investing in a sustainable way. We are investing in our roads, we are investing wrong completely. I want to ensure that people have access to this, all of our people have access to this. And even, as you can imagine, if our car dependency is that large, it is our second largest emission sector, accounting for 23% of all of our emissions. This could be easily reduced by addressing our problems that have been long standing for decades. And even if you want to look up at the top, that photo goes from 1920 to our current system in 2020. So many areas left out, so many people left behind. We can combat this, we can make accessible, cheap and fully rounded public transport services that everyone can access and we can benefit from together. If we're going to combat climate change, we need to do it with full force, and public transport comes into this completely. And I will pass on to Anna, our next speaker.
Hi, I'm going to talk about air pollution, which is a massive issue in Northern Ireland. If you take just Belfast, that one city, 1 in 24 people in Belfast die from air pollution every single year. This was 178 people just in Belfast in 2019. These levels are the second highest in the UK, higher than even London, yet we're such a tiny city. and these levels are illegal. So this is something that we really, really need to address. In 2016, Northern Ireland's greenhouse gas emissions were estimated to be 20.6 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. And in Northern Ireland, this shows that it equates to 11 tonnes per capita in Northern Ireland, whereas it's 7.1 tonnes per capita in the rest of the UK. So our air pollution levels are much, much higher than they should be for such a small population, and this is really going to have a negative effect on the health of the people. If we also look at agriculture, agriculture is Northern Ireland's largest emitting sector, at 27% of our emissions coming from agriculture. However, in the rest of the UK, agriculture accounts for just 10% of greenhouse emissions. So again, we're coming up much, much higher than the rest of the UK in terms of this. And 3/4 of houses in Northern Ireland are powered by oil or electric, and so a huge increase in infrastructure is needed to decarbonise homes. This is something that needs a massive amount of investment, and a massive amount of prioritising needs to be done that hasn't been looked at in decades and decades.
I'm going to speak about the forestry in Northern Ireland. So shockingly, Northern Ireland's forest cover is just 6.5% compared to 8.7% in England. The entirety of the UK needs 1.5 million hectares of forestry cover to absorb as much carbon as we produce. In Northern Ireland, the land use and land use change and forestry sector has become a net emitter rather than a carbon sink. So, yeah, it is imperative that we begin the mass planting of trees and the right trees to mitigate this. And yet another climate-related concern is rising sea level rise, is rising sea levels. In the IPCC report, it states that sea level rise poses one of the most widely recognised climate change threats to low-lying coastal areas. This is particularly important in small islands like Northern Ireland, where the majority of human communities and infrastructure is located in coastal zones with limited on-island relocation opportunities. And yeah, in 2016, it was revealed that 3 of our largest cities, Belfast, Derry and Newry, were at the biggest risk of coastal flooding due to this rise. The effects of sea level rise can include heavy rains and strong winds unleashing severe storms. That could be a big threat to us, and it can cause soil erosion, threaten farmland, housing and relocation, cause people being forced to move due to this effect of climate change. And yeah, climate change and inaction has also led to many concerns about our biodiversity. According to the National Biodiversity Network, State of Nature, 270 species in Ireland are at risk of extinction. So, yeah, we need solutions to the sea level rise include planting more trees and taking care of the wild spaces we already have, protecting wetlands and ambitious climate legislation, and reducing greenhouse gases and everything. So, yeah.
So I'm just going to discuss the climate crisis and the impacts on young people. So the decisions now made by governments now will have a detrimental effect on our future, and it is imperative that we as young people are kept well informed. Young people's awareness of the impact of climate change is impacting upon their mental health, and to deal with mental health, action is required. To deal with climate change, action is required. Young people know what young people want and what is needed to have a better future and create change. The current ecological crisis is having an impact on young people's mental health, with crime and anxiety becoming most prominent amongst young people. So we'll get to our proposals on pledges. So what we are proposing. We are proposing additional funds provided for the Northern Ireland Department of Infrastructure to battle decade-old regional inequality. We are proposing a new regional left behind policy to be implemented in regards to accessible public transport. We are proposing affordable public transport with free passes for under 18 to incentivize use, aiming to create free fares for the general public when necessity is proven. We propose to use Northern Ireland's unique economic position, both in the UK market along with the EU market, to attract environmental sustainable businesses rather than mining and polluting corporations. We propose investment in the infrastructure needed to decarbonise heating homes. We propose that the Northern Ireland Assembly listen to the science and make necessary changes to combat the climate and ecological emergency and the threats that come with it. We propose the creation of a national and a devolved youth advisory group for the government's 2050 zero emission target. Young people need to be kept well informed and in the loop, where the effects of the climate crisis is vital, and vital decisions made by governments now will have a long-lasting impact on the future we inherit. We propose that devolved and national governments use the year 2050 as a worst-case scenario and aim to be net zero as soon as attainable. So thank you very much. That is our presentation finished.
Thank you so much, guys. That was really, really informative, and I know there was so much information packed into your slides, and I'm sure so many of us would love to read your slides later. So we already have a hand raised by Mia. Can we get her promoted to a panelist so she can ask a question? And remember, anyone who's attending can ask a question. Just remember to raise your hand about any of the pledges so far.
Hello?
Hi Mia, would you like to ask a question?
No, I was about to say something about the presentation. I do agree with you that trees also affect climate change, but I also think that paper from trees is also very important in necessary life, so what I think they should do instead is to not just stop cutting down trees, is to just try to find another alternative for certain things, like instead of doing school paper sometimes you can do it electronically or things like that. But I don't think that we can completely try to cut down trees because that'll be not possible.
Thank you so much for that insight. Do one of our speakers want to reply to that?
Oh, Georgia, do you want to jump in? Just because your slide, I'm going to jump in.
Yeah, I agree. I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not about cutting down trees. I think we all want to protect our trees, of course. We want to create more trees so they can intercept the precipitation, they can prevent flooding. We're proposing, kind of a lot of trees to be planted here in the north, and it's especially needed, I think. The forestry has been quite underwhelming and kind of, depleting in recent years. So going forward, we definitely need to combat that in its fullest. And 100% I agree with you completely. No more cutting down trees.
Thank you so much, guys. We had another hand up. I think it was Ella. Can we get her promoted to the panelist? Hi Ella, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, I just think about the thing with cutting down trees is if you do cut them down, although yes there are lots of trees in the world, if slowly and very slowly still, you are starting to take away lots of air and life from yourself as you were doing that. And in, yes, a very, very long time, still, but you're not going to have any more trees, and then you basically just killed yourself.
That's a really insightful point. Thank you so much. If anyone from the panel would like to respond to that, that'd be great, or we can move on. Does anyone like to take that?
Hi, I'll jump in. Hi, 100%. I think it does need to be, we do, trees are a huge part of it, they can, take on our carbon, they pretty much part in our lives, and I don't think anybody here will disagree. I think it's, cutting down trees has to be protected, of course, it has to be planting trees along with that as well, doing so in a sustainable and, way that, we aren't denying this, that we're actually just doing things in a way that will benefit our climate, but also benefit our people, and just kind of have a good balance towards things. I think that's really the approach we need to have here. But 100%, protect our trees is a huge thing as well too.
Olivia, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I found the concept of a youth advisory panel really interesting, and I just wanted to ask, how would you like the government to include young people in decision making through that panel?
Well, we know the UK has set a target for the 2050 zero emissions target. So, when I'm talking in regards of the youth advisory group, it would be young people from the different devolved nations meeting regularly with the government on the progress of this net zero target.
I think engagement's a big thing too. I think that's sometimes what we can miss in politics. We aren't engaging with the right people. We aren't engaging with people most affected. And as Oren said in his presentation, we inherit all this. We need to be right in the centre of these conversations, not being talked about, but being spoke to, and speaking to them, and just ensuring that we're fully in the loop. Of course, as Oren said, that's my contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answers, guys. Just for the sake of time, I would now like to move on to our vote. So if you would like to look in the chat for the pledges that they're proposing, just a quick summary of them. They're focusing on a no region left behind policy, accessible public transport and free travel for under 18s. They're going to use Northern Ireland's unique economic position to attract environmentally sustainable businesses. And they propose a creation of a national and devolved youth advisory panel for the government's 2050 zero emissions targets. And the final one is that devolved and national governments use the year 2050 as a worst case scenario and aim to be net zero as soon as attainable. So these are really fantastic pledges that we have here. Can we take it to a vote now? I don't know if our tech team is going to get the poll up soon. Okay, get voting, guys.
This is brilliant. Lashini, where else do they go to show their fakes? Is it social media?
Absolutely. So if you've enjoyed what you've seen so far and you're supporting what we're looking to do, please head to social media and use our hashtag #SeeThroughPlastic. We're going to drop it in the chat right now. And we'd love this to go viral. We want as many young people to be involved as possible, and this will only help us do this. Great, we have an amazing outcome. So we have 95% of you going for 4. We have 1 abstention. That's absolutely fine. But I'm really pleased to say that we have voted for these pledges. Well done, guys. I would now like to pass back to Theo to introduce our next.
What I would love to do is we have voted on their first pledge. Oh, I haven't even got my camera on. We have voted on their first pledge, which was about free transport, which is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. We have the second one coming, don't we, Lashini? This is up. So, if you don't mind, see, as you will see here, there's a second poll which is coming up on your screen. This is for the second pledge that they're proposing. As they were saying before, this is about using their UK unique position. This is the one we've had a little bit of chat about already. It's about banning the mining and polluting companies from entering the market. So no more companies from them certain industries to enter the market. Do we agree with that? Do you think that's a plan we want to have? Thank you. Lashini, do you want to do the next one?
Yeah, apologies, guys, for that one. The votes are slowly coming in. Okay, and the vote is now in. We have a 90% for this one, which is really exciting. So this one is actually going to pass. Can we get the next pledge? Okay, so our next pledge is about a youth advisory panel, and this is on a national level and a devolved level. And this is about the government's 2050 zero emissions targets. The pledge also proposes that the 2050 is going to be a worst case scenario, so we want the government to act as soon as possible. Keep voting, guys. Okay, how many votes do we have in? Keep voting, guys. We have 19 votes. As many of you can vote as possible. It would be great to see that there. Keep voting. Also, once again, I'm going to say this again, please head to social media if you really are enjoying this so far, and throughout the event, keep using our hashtag #SeeThroughPlastic. Remember, the poll is still open, so if you haven't voted, please do vote. Okay, our poll is closed, and we actually have 100% for this pledge, so that's an amazing outcome. I'm sure you can now all see the poll results, and it's a fantastic outcome. Thank you so much, guys, for voting on these pledges. These are really amazing pledges, and this is all going to go towards our demands for COP26. This event has been fantastic so far, and this session is now at its end. I'd like to hand over to our next hosts, who are going to be introducing our next guests.
Hi, Lashini. Thank you for that incredible job you just did. So my name is Surura, and I'm here as the next host along with Faizan. So I hope you're all doing well. And like Lashini said before, I hope we're putting the hashtag in. I hope we're tweeting. I hope we're doing as much as we can. There are prizes. There are things to win. So please continue to pay attention and please continue to listen. Without further ado, I would like to pass it over to my co-host Faizan to introduce our next group. Faizan, take it away.
Right, hello. So I'm Faizan, Member of Youth Parliament for Redbridge, and without further ado, I'm going to introduce our next co-host who shall be speaking. This is an organisation called NCAF Youth, who are an umbrella group that has homed over 80 organisations and is based in Enfield and is one of the strongest boroughs. Yeah, one of the strongest boroughs in climate activity. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest from NCAF Youth.
Hello, thank you. My name is Monica and I am from NCAF Youth along with Olivia, Anna and James. And today we have 4 pledges and I'm going to be taking the first pledge, which is about incinerators. So our first pledge is the government should not construct any more incinerators and should cease to use them by 2030 to align with the IPCC's targets for carbon neutrality. So to expand on to this point, incinerators produce a wide variety of pollutants which affect human health, causing health risks such as lung cancer and asthma attacks, which is why the government should not construct any more incinerators. Moving on to our second pledge, the government should create a criteria for industrial areas and have periodic reviewings to consider if there's still industrial areas. So as you can see the little diagram on screen right now, I'm just going to expand on that a little bit more. So if the government have reviewed the industrial area and it is still classed industrial, then no further action should be taken. However, we encourage the removal of the incinerator in accordance with the first sub-pledge. If it is not classed industrial, then there shall be a removal of incinerators and the incinerator building to be repurposed, if possible, into something like a recycling centre. And in this event, the incinerator has to stay and the council must make the incinerator as environmentally friendly as possible. So, for example, they could ensure that the waste is sorted to prevent the burning of recyclable waste. Moving on to the third pledge, the government should consider population density when maintaining or building incinerators. So this will decrease the risk posed by emissions from incinerators to the public's health. So this is a really important pledge because if the government are aware of the population, they're also aware of how close people are living near the incinerator, because this is a huge risk for people's health. And moving on to the last pledge for incinerators, the government should introduce an incinerator tax, which should be used to fund recycling schemes. So this will therefore increase waste to be recycled, creating no use for incinerators, which is our main aim in this pledge. And we're actually the only country in Europe that doesn't have an incinerator tax. So I believe if we did, it would be a huge deterrent for having to even use incinerators in the first place. Thank you, they're all my pledges. I'm now going to move on to the next speaker, who I believe is James.
Hi everybody. So I'll be talking about our second pledge, which is legal accountability and environmental justice. So as you can see from the screen, we've divided this into 3 sub-pledges. So firstly, we're going to deal with the international pledge. So we would like to see more legal accountability for states who fail to reach their emissions targets. Now, these targets can be both those set out in international agreements and also domestic targets set by individual countries. And we could help achieve this by better utilising existing environmental courts and tribunals, which are not currently being used effectively. Now, these courts are actually already in place by the UN's environmental programme, which is called UNEP. However, we would like to see a greater use of these and an overall raising of legal accountability, because it's essential that states are held to account for failures in meeting their targets, because otherwise what will happen is states can just get away with making empty promises and overall nothing substantially positive is done for the environment. So as such, our international sub-pledge would be, we'd like to see a commitment to full state accountability in relation to emissions targets. Now for our domestic sub-pledges. So firstly, we'd like to see the government put in place a statutory provision to protect against environmental discrimination. And they could do this by making use of the protected characteristics which are already set out in the Equality Act 2010. And these protected characteristics cannot be infringed upon in a discriminatory way. So to put this into context, an example of environmental discrimination could be seen in the fact that more deprived areas are usually the target locations for things such as incinerators. Ultimately, this is completely unequal and unjust. Therefore, a statutory provision would allow individuals to hold those who have made these decisions to be held to account by way of the law and essentially seek remedy. If we are to achieve environmental justice in the UK, something we have not really seen at all, then we must outlaw environmental injustice on a national scale. So our final sub-pledge on the domestic level is following on from that, which is that we want to see significant improvement to access to environmental justice, particularly considering it disproportionately affects marginalised communities, as I've already mentioned. Access to environmental justice means that those who are subjected to discriminatory decisions in an environmental context are able to seek justice and resolution through the courts. Now, this is crucial, as if access to environmental justice is low, then ultimately it allows for a continuous cycle of unjust decision-making, and those who are subject to this unjust decision-making are simply trapped within that cycle and cannot seek remedy, whether that be legally. So that's all of the pledges for legal accountability and environmental justice. And I really do hope you would vote for these, because we must firstly hold the states to account for their emissions targets, which was our first sub-pledge. We must secondly outlaw environmental discrimination. And we must thirdly improve access to environmental justice. Thank you. So I'm now going to move on to the third speaker. Thank you for listening.
Hi, sorry. So I'll be talking about equity on the global stage, and this is our pledge, and it's split into 3 sub-pledges here. And so first, we'd like the government to stop offsetting their emissions to developing countries. So I'll explain offsetting a bit, which is the reduction of emissions or greenhouse gases in order to compensate for emissions made elsewhere. And the reason that governments offsetting to developing countries are quite problematic is because normally it takes the form of trees, and trees take a long time to grow, and sometimes later on in their life they are cut down through deforestation. And as you can see, if we did have trees as a way to offset our emissions, it wouldn't actually really be sustainable or achieve the offsetting. What we'd actually like to see is a reduction in emissions. So that's why we'd like the government to stop offsetting to developing countries. And just adding on from that, it's quite cheap to offset our emissions to the global south, and that disproportionately affects them, especially Indigenous people's rights. They might be forced out of their homes in order to make room for these trees that are being planted. And also links to climate colonialism, where less powerful nations and peoples are often dominated by the more richer, more powerful ones, through initiatives that are meant to kind of slow down the pace of climate breakdown. So that way it would be unfair. So that's why we'd like the government to stop offsetting their emissions to developing countries. Our second sub-pledge is that emissions should be counted in the total emissions from the country. So what we mean by that is we can use the example of recycling. So quite a lot of our recycling is sent to other countries such as Malaysia, Turkey, and Poland because they've got the facilities to recycle our waste. And a lot of the time, especially in Malaysia, the waste that we send there is often burnt instead of recycled. And in order for equity and fairness with climate change, we're asking that any, like for example, the waste sent to Malaysia that is then burnt, it produces emissions. And because the UK is the origin source of those emissions, the UK has to count those emissions as their own rather than Malaysia's. So that way it could be fair on when looking at which countries are polluting the most, because a lot of this time it gets muddled up who's actually responsible for what emissions. And then the third sub-pledge is ring fencing an environmental aid budget. So by ring fence, we mean that the government has to guarantee that the funds they're setting aside for environmental aid, for example, in this scenario, it has to be spent on environmental aid. We don't want to see it coming out from other budgets or just not being fully delivered. We want environmental aid to be fully given and delivered in its full amount. So that's what we mean by ring fence. And the reason that it's necessary to have an environmental aid budget, because if we are going to reach our global targets and reduce our global emissions, then we need to see sustainable development and we need to see sustainable initiatives built up. So if we are sending aid to other countries, it should be in the form of sustainable, to see sustainable development over there. So yeah, these are our 3 sub-pledges on equity on the global stage. And I'll be passing it over to Anna, who's going to talk on recycling now.
Okay, thank you. So our last pledge is waste and recycling, and there's like 5 sub-pledges for this. So the first one is compulsory education for all school children in primary and secondary schools on recycling. We believe this is really important, that we have to target younger people because they'll be the ones influencing their friends, their parents, and that's how change will happen. Our second sub-pledge is compulsory for businesses to recycle and compost waste. Now, some small businesses are unable to afford recycling, especially during these times. So it's important that there's a way in which these businesses will be able to afford this. So for example, government subsidies, that could be perhaps an idea. Our third sub-pledge is incinerators must sort recycling and ensure minimal amount of recyclable waste is burnt. Now, we've done our research and more than 50% of the waste incinerated is actually not recyclable. It is recyclable, and if it was sorted, then we would be able to use more sustainable and it would be better for the planet. Then our fourth sub-pledge is governments should discourage supermarkets in using unnecessary plastic packaging and promote plastic-free supermarkets nationwide. What this means is essentially that if the government promotes supermarkets that promote plastic-free products, then these supermarkets will be more motivated to keep going and also influence other supermarkets, and they will not want to stay behind, so they will join with them as well. And for example, unnecessary plastic packaging can be packaging fruits that, for example, might not be necessarily need to be packaged with plastic. And then our fifth sub-pledge is governments to ban the waste of unsold food produced by supermarkets and food outlets. Actually, in France, it's illegal to throw away food that is unsold. So what they do is they collect it all, and what they do is they pass it on to shelters, homeless people, and the poor as well. So those are our 5 sub-pledges for waste and recycling. It's really important that we target young people for this because that's where the conversation will continue. So it's really important. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for speaking. That was a good presentation. Now let's see who has questions. I believe we have a question on the Q&A from Rupes. What about the environmental impact of products that are produced elsewhere in the world for UK consumers?
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Sure. This is from Rupert. They asked, what about the environmental impact of products that are produced elsewhere here in the world for UK consumers?
Yeah, so we do think that that is very important, and I think that kind of falls into how other countries would like to reduce their own emissions. The reason we didn't actually include that in our pledges is I think it's a really good point. Actually, I think we should have, but I just think that it's more that falls into more other countries trying to reduce their emissions. But yeah, I think that's a really good point that you.
All right, I hope you got a
Thank
chance
you
there.
so much. That presentation was packed with a lot of valuable information. I'm going to see if is anyone with their hands up, and we have Mia Wanley with her hand up. Can we have someone promote her to panelist?
Hi.
Hi.
So, as I was about to say, is what I also think that not only secondary and primary school should learn about it, just as how the plastic can impact the environment quite badly, and they should also learn how to not use as much plastic, and the way how to do that for them to count how much plastic they use before, and then they can see if their families are more plastic or use more plastic or not. And after that, then the class can learn how to not use plastic together and learn how to learn from each other as well. And I also think that they should also learn how plastic can affect us humans as well. From drinking water from bottles can give us microplastics in our bloodstream.
Thank you for that question. Do we have anybody wanting to answer?
Yeah, I think that is. I think we NCAF definitely agree with that, and I think that is exactly what Anna meant when she was talking about her sub pledge. Is that it does need to be spoke about a lot more in schools, and I think you summed it up perfectly. Not only does the little things need to be spoken about, but it needs to be spoken about on a wider scale, and spoken about really in depth. So I definitely think we all agree in NCAF that when it is taught in primary and secondary schools, it should be taught for a long period of time, really in depth.
Thank you. I see that one of our panelists also has a question. Shay, if you could unmute yourself.
Hi, that was a really good presentation, so thank you for that. I just have a question about the incinerator tax. So would that also be for like people who buy incinerators and they like use it in their gardens to burn papers and stuff, or is it literally just for industrial incinerators?
Do you have an answer?
I guess that would just have to be for the government to decide, which is why we are pledging incinerator tax to the government. So I guess that would just all be down to them, and they'd have to then decide, because this is why we're pledging it to them, because I think they're the ones that really need to take lead on incinerators now and actually realize what a big risk they are and how much they can harm public's health. And I think incinerator tax would definitely make people more aware on the seriousness of incinerators. So I guess it would be down to the government to definitely decide who would be taxed and how that would all work.
Just to add on to that as well, I think the government would need to impose a tax on councils that would be sending their waste to incinerators. So any waste that does get sent there will be taxed rather than individuals, and hopefully individuals won't actually have to rely on burning their own waste in their gardens, because there would be enough recycling schemes to dispose of their waste correctly. So I hope that answers your question.
And before we move on to the polls, we have one more question from the attendees. Cassie, can they please be promoted to panelist?
Hi.
Hello.
I just wanted to ask, what's an incinerator?
Can we have an answer?
Yeah, so an incinerator is basically something that's used to burn solid waste for the purpose of reducing the volume of waste by removing combustible matter. So it's basically used to burn waste, basically. And yeah, that's basically what.
Can I just quickly add on to that? And I was going to say, one of the biggest problems we have with the incinerators is that it's the sorting process that's often really an issue. I can use a local example where I live. There's an incinerator, and 50% of the things that are burnt are in fact recyclable. And it's that whole process of burning recyclable solids and goods, which is a real issue as well, because of all they can be recycled. And what's happening is there's no sorting process. And therefore these recyclable goods that could have been disposed of in a far more efficient way are simply being turned into emissions. So that's another big issue with what is burnt in the incinerators. But yeah.
Thank you so much to NCAF. Now we're going to be moving on to the polls. Just to quickly summarize, the first category was equity on a global stage, which included having the government to stop offsetting their emissions and ring fence an environmental aid budget. The second category was waste and recycling, compulsory education for all school children, including primary and secondary schools on recycling. Incinerators must sort recycling and compulsory for businesses to recycle and compost waste. And governments should also discourage supermarkets in using unnecessary plastic packaging and much more. Again, the pledge is in the chat if anybody would like to have an in-detailed read. But can we have the polls up so we can get voting? Thank you. So number 1 is for the incinerator. Can we please start the vote? We're going to need everybody voting. We've only had about 30 people vote. We've got 80%. The last few seconds, can people please get their votes in? Okay, I think that might be the end. So the results are for 68%, 26 of you, against 16%, and 16% also abstained. Can we move to the next poll? So that is definitely going to be put in the pages. The next one is legal accountability and environmental justice. The last few seconds, if you haven't voted, please put in your vote. I'm going to allow 10 more seconds. And that is it. So we have 83% voted for 4 and 17% abstained, and nobody was against. So that will also be put on the list of pledges. So we have the next one. Okay. Equity on the global stage.
Gary, do you want to throw that music on again? I love it.
Yeah.
Add some drama.
Okay, voting is up. So we have the poll closed. So for equity on the global stage, we have 94% for 4, 3% against, and 3 abstained. So that will also be going on our list of pledges. Now we have waste and recycling. So please don't forget to be pushing through with the hashtag. There's a lot of good things being said here. The more coverage, the more beneficial it will be for everyone, and the more we can get our message out. Okay, can we now close the voting? We have 91% for, 3% against, and 6% abstained. So that is also going on our list of pledges. Thank you very much. Okay, I guess that is it. Thank you very much to NCAP. We really appreciate it. Thank you. All the points that you put on there were very, very interesting, insightful. Everybody keep tweeting, keep getting the news out there, and I would now like to pass it on to our next host. Thank you very much from me and from Faizan.
Who's next to speak, Theo?
We have Tyve, who should be speaking now. Can you please be promoted to analyst?
Guys, can you hear that? I think it's time. And what time is it for? Guys, I think it's giveaway time.
Woo!
I'm not gonna lie, I think it is. We saved this point of the day for when.
Wow.
Ah, that makes sense. Okay.
That's great. Yeah. So what we're doing is giveaway time. So I mean, we're going to check through the social media. We're going to look at those who have used your hashtag. Do you know what? Go on. You have like under 30 seconds before I check. I think someone else.
I love the drama.
You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm just going to pretend as if you lot have been tweeting the whole time, so you can try and sneak in a giveaway now. What we're going to do today is, whoever is going to go on there, we'll give away. How many trees should we give away, Gary? Should we give away 5 trees?
I think that's. I like 7.
7.
7's a good number.
7 trees in Madagascar will be planted in your name, which is going to be going to giving people a lovely work. Giving those money, it can also give them a good community, as well as give people like us a cleaner air and a better future, alright? So, should we have a look at this, Gary? Should we have a look at the Twitter?
Great idea.
Let's see who's on there.
Oh, so we have some lovely posts for Faizan up there. Oh, I've posted, I didn't even know that. Let's have a look at who's used the hashtag. Gary, have you used the hashtag today?
Lots and lots of times, but I can't win, so I don't mind.
Ah, yeah. This is awesome. I can see loads of people using this hashtag. Okay, at the top of this we have we have someone called Nargus. Who's Nargus? Do you have Nargus? I'll spell it. It's Narges. If that's you. Hello. Oh, we have a winner. Okay, brilliant.
Oh.
I will drop you.
Well done.
Personally, well done. This is what's going to happen. Helping this get to a national scale.
I feel so blessed. So blessed. Thank you so much.
And how can you
Congrats.
have trees planted in your name? And this is the only time it's going to happen tonight, so keep on tweeting. You can win a second time. Imagine you can have all the trees in Madagascar planted in your name. If this goes on all night.
That's so amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
So brilliant. And that's all with Charles and his organisation who's going to be helping organise that. So thank you so much for getting in contact with Paul. For now, I'm going to pass the tape to continue on with your event. Thanks, Lashini. Well done.
Thank you, Theo. My name is Kate. I will be your host, and I'm more than lucky to be hosting the News to Reuse organization. It is an organization, an anti-fast fashion campaign that aims to include fast fashion in the school curriculum in order to increase awareness of its devastating social and environmental impacts. So they also wish to hold these brands accountable for actions that violate basic human rights and the environment. So they look to mitigate the impacts that TNCs have on the net income countries such as Bangladesh, India, China, all exploited for their relaxed environmental laws and lack of human rights.
Yeah, I'm on the Zoom call thing, but sorry, no, what you need to do.
Had to be something, innit? Keep going, keep going.
Lashini will be my co-host for this session. And yeah, I think I'd like to pass on to the News to Reuse team. Go ahead, take the floor.
Thank you for that introduction. So, fashion isn't typically considered a significant danger to the environment. Did you know that textile production contributes more to climate change than international aviation and shipping combined? That is staggering. We hear about brands such as PLT and Boohoo all over social media, but do we hear about the devastation they cause to the environment? No. At school, when we learn about climate change, we talk about cars and CO2, but that's something that we as young people who likely don't drive can't do much about. Why don't we talk about fashion and how small changes in our shopping habits can significantly reduce emissions? Now I'm going to take you over to Annabelle to explain how the fashion industry will set back our ability to reach the UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 if we don't act now.
Thank you so much, Abigail. So, at the heart of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development are the 17 Development Goals, which all UN member states signed in 2015. Now, Goal 12 is to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. However, currently, we couldn't really be further from this. Whilst one of the targets of Goal 12 is efficient use of resources, the increasing demand for fast fashion and synthetic materials is currently producing around 342 million barrels of crude oil each year. And even more natural materials like cotton can produce up to 10,000 litres of water to make just one jacket. So we're therefore failing miserably at meeting these targets, and fast fashion is a primary reason. One underlying point of Goal 12 is reducing waste by recycling and reusing. Yet only 1% of textile waste is currently being recycled into new clothing. So what I want to know is how on earth are we allowing companies to directly decrease our chances of meeting these sustainability goals, all in the name of profit? Companies that Abigail mentioned earlier are responsible for a huge amount of environmental damage. It goes even further than the climate when considering that amongst the UN's 17 goals, pledges are made in favour of decent work, against gender inequality and against poverty. Yet of all sweatshop workers, 85 to 90% of them are women, and of all workers, only 2% are paid a living wage. Considering that Boohoo only paid workers in a leisure factory not even a minimum wage, what on earth could we be funding abroad in countries that don't have the same worker protection rights?
The government therefore must hold brands accountable for the devastation they cause, and we as consumers have a right to know and make educated decisions about our spending habits. That's why the last target I'm going to touch on is directly related to our pledges. Under Target 12, it's listed that companies must be encouraged to adopt sustainable practice and integrate sustainability information into their reporting cycle. That's why, in order to meet the UN's targets, it's imperative that we push for brands to become transparent with consumers about the impact their garments have on our environment and climate. Now over to Olaf to discuss our pledges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. So, why are our pledges worth your time, and what really are the impacts of fast fashion? Well, the impacts can be split into multiple strands. The impacts on our health and the impacts on the health of our planet. And this links into, as Annabelle has mentioned, the UN Sustainable Development Goals and our ability to reach them whilst fast fashion continues untackled. So first of all, our health. If you were to check the tags on the clothes in your wardrobe, you're likely to find that many of them are made of polyester, nylon and acrylic. From your school uniform to your jeans, synthetic materials are everywhere. 60% of clothes are made up of synthetic materials derived from petrochemicals which do not decompose. Now these materials degrade in the washing cycle, with plastic fibres escaping in every wash, the majority of which end up in our oceans. A recent survey found that 1 in 3 fish in the English Channel had synthetic fibres in their guts. The scale of microplastics in our diets and potentially in our bodies is still unknown, as these microplastics climb up the food chain from our fish to our plates to our diets. The design process faces trends about sustainability. It is vital that we ethically source our textiles and regulate the use of such materials which shed plastic fibres in our clothes. Now onto our planet's health. Whilst our well-being is impacted, so is the well-being of our planet. And what effect do these synthetic materials have on our planet and on our emissions, and why should this be tackled by the UK? Now according to Oxfam, new clothes in the UK produce more carbon emissions per minute than driving a car around the world, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 6 times. That's equivalent to more than 40,000 kilometres worth of driving every 60 seconds. The impact that this industry has on our planet and on our health can simply not be ignored any longer. This is why a Sustainable Fashion Day would be imperative in empowering consumers about what choices they can be making to help our planet, from things as basic as mending clothes to fair consumption. It's through our pledges, that we will go on to explain now, that we tackle this unsustainable industry, because we must act now. And now on to Fatima to explain more.
Thank you very much, Olaf. Before I begin, I want to ask some questions for you all. To think, when was the last time you heard the government even mention sustainability? We live in a so-called representative democracy. However, it has been years and years that people have been calling out the horrid treatment many people face across the country. Moreover, in the UK, such as Google factories and Leicester, how is that representative of our views and our morals? When was the last time you heard the PM talk about fast fashion? The answer to these questions, quite simply, is never. Without the work of small pressure groups such as the Compost campaign, or the Centre for Sustainable Fashion, or the work of amazing APGs for ethics and sustainability in fashion, there would be no conversation. Research recently carried out showed that 65% of UK residents agree that the government should be more urgent in the impacts of fast fashion and the impacts it has on the environment. If this is the case, why are they not doing anything about it? News to Reuse want to call on the government to recognise and promote a sustainable education fashion day through engaging MPs and encouraging the participation of schools across the country. No young person should be oblivious to the environmental issues facing our planet. We have days such as World Kindness Day, which is to promote positivity and kindness. Surely it's fundamental to promote the same for workers who are getting paid 14p a day in Bangladesh, or to protect the world, as each year 1.3 trillion gallons of water are used for fabric dyeing alone. These inherent double standards can no longer stand. It is advised that the government use this pledge, as the environment is our future, and if we do not learn adequately, how are we supposed to protect it? Now this can be done in 2 main ways. It can be done by obviously having a whole day dedicated to sustainable fashion, to at least get this conversation started. This can be done by having MPs come to Parliament wearing a piece of sustainable fashion to at least show the support for this movement. You can also break this vicious cycle we have. We need more people in power to make bold statements. Sustainable Fashion Day also needs to be in the education system. The government has failed to equip young people with the tools and education in how to stop the excessive need to buy 10p LTD dresses for 30p, or to buy expensive tracksuits made at the cost of young children. We should be given this information, not having to chase it later on in life. Having a sustainable fashion days in school consists of having lessons about the impacts of fast fashion, having kids learn about the harsh realities of fast fashion, and more importantly, opening this platform up. It is fundamental to make this change, and by implementing this change, it can begin to fix this toxic culture that has arisen. I hope to urge you to vote for this pledge, and just to reiterate, Ministry Reviews wants to promote a sustainable education fashion day all across the country. Now on to Serena and Abby.
Thank you, Fatima. Next, we call the government to hold themselves accountable for environmental impacts resulting from fast fashion production abroad, and acknowledge that considering the UK's culture of overconsumption and waste, it is their moral obligation to support developing countries in their shift to a green economy. There are a copious number of effects of fast fashion production in our country and abroad. However, the major issue is that while this country to a certain extent addresses fast fashion issues, and we know this through the use of recycling programmes and stringent environmental laws, the environment issues of fast fashion are largely overlooked abroad, where pollution exceeds healthy levels, brands exploit the country's lax environmental regulations. It's clear that there needs to be an improvement in the education of fast fashion. However, many consumers are already aware of the negative effects and still only a small number change their habits. Awareness will only take us so far. We need the government to act now. The current climate crisis we live in cannot wait for every individual to eventually make a change in their shopping habits. This is where we call them to do what's morally right, helping the countries we rely on for manufacturing make their environment cleaner. It's not fair for us to benefit from the nice clothes whilst knowing that they're living and working in horrible conditions stemming from our greed.
We understand the manufacturing process can't be stopped, and it would be hugely unfair to damage the economies of developing countries. So instead, we ask the UK to use their privilege of being a global leader in tackling climate change and having a clear plan to reach net zero by 2050 to support these countries and their governments by integrating green technology as a means to combat skyrocketing carbon emissions. These don't have to be huge changes, but any change helps. It could be swapping the lighting from the traditional one to LED or CFL lights, which have a significantly less energy requirement. Or it could be the investment in solar panels, especially in hotter countries, where using sunlight as a source of electricity is a lot more reliable. There are lots more methods, but the final one I'd like to address is reusing waste products. This could be incinerating the waste into thermal energy, which avoids waste and produces electricity. These green technologies will greatly benefit manufacturing countries abroad. Finally, to reiterate, we call on the governments to hold themselves accountable for the severe impacts stemming from fast fashion production abroad for the benefit of the UK consumer, and call on them to use their privilege as a global leader in tackling climate change to encourage a shift within sustainability. I'll now pass on to Alice to talk about her next pledge.
Thank you, Serena. So moving on to our third pledge, it's to call on the government to facilitate transparency between brands and consumers through the use of QR codes on clothing labels, which inform the consumer on the garment's environmental impact. So I, like I assume everyone else here, try and make the most ethical and sustainable choice in my day-to-day life to minimise my negative impact on the planet. Yet this has become a great issue when it comes to clothing. Trying to figure out the impact of the things we buy is incredibly difficult when companies are not transparent about the impact of their clothing production and mask the real facts with greenwashing. For the everyday consumer, extensive research on every piece of clothing they want to buy isn't feasible. How can we act on the shift towards environmental consciousness and the knowledge acquired by climate education if the information is not out there for us to look at our impact through fashion? This is why Ministry Reviews proposes QR codes on clothing labels. These would be an accessible and simple way for the consumer to view the carbon footprint of their clothing, taking into account the impact of fabric and materials used, the factories they're produced in, considering the supply chain of the garments, and also the treatment of the workers within it. With all this information easily presented in one place, it will allow the consumer to make the most ethical choice and see the environmental impact of their decisions with one scan. Given that the fashion industry is set to take up 26% of the carbon budget by 2050, we think it is vital that the public is given this tool to enable the consumer to make the most ethical and educated purchase. Furthermore, brand transparency will force these brands who've spent many years polluting our planet with their policies to make clear to the public exactly what they're doing. And perhaps this shift of support by the public, who will easily now be able to choose the more ethical option, will force their hand into making more environmentally conscious choices within their production and supply chain. As my colleagues have already shown, a great deal of the general public want to do something about the environmental impact of the fashion industry, and brand transparency and QR codes will provide a simple tool to effectively minimise our own carbon footprint and encourage, through the brands we continue to support, big brands to do the same.
Thank you, Alice. Okay, just to reiterate our calls to the government. First of all, we call the government to recognise and promote a sustainable education/fashion day through engaging MPs and encouraging the participation of schools across the country. No young person should be oblivious to the environmental issues facing our planet. The environment is our future, and if we don't learn about it adequately, how are we supposed to protect it? Second of all, we call on the government to hold themselves accountable for environmental impact resulting from fast fashion production abroad, and acknowledge that considering the UK's culture of overconsumption and waste, it is their moral obligation to support developing countries in their shift to a green economy. And last, we call on the government to facilitate transparency between brands and consumers through the use of QR codes on clothing tags. These QR codes should enable consumers to easily access data on the garment's carbon footprint. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. That's been really, really informative, and I really didn't know the impact of the fashion industry on our environment. We have a hand raised already, so can we get Elizabeth as a panelist, please?
Hi. Hi, I completely agree with what you said about fast fashion. It's terrible the amount of resources they use up. But I'm wondering, is there any way, because it's so cheap and that's what people love about it, is there any way we could like bring a tax on it? So the clothing is dearer and it's up to the same level as sustainable clothing. I just think that would be great, but I know it might be hard to implement, but really great. I loved all your information.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
That's a great suggestion.
Sorry, does someone from the panel want to answer that?
That's a really good suggestion, and I think taxing people is a good idea, but then it's not accessible for people from lower incomes. So I think that the best way to move around fast fashion would be to educate people so that they realise that secondhand, it isn't always cheap and ugly looking like as people typically think. Like, there are ways around it. But I do think that fast fashion will have to become more expensive to less exploit the workers and to actually pay them adequately. And if they are going to invest in sustainable materials, then taxes will have to be given and prices will have to be raised. But I think at the moment the key issue is education and accountability. The brands need to be held accountable for their actions that violate the human rights and the environment.
Thank you so much, Abby, for that. We have another question in our chat. Tate, would you like to read it out?
So we have a hand raised from Mia. I think she's been made a panelist, so feel free to unmute yourself. Mia, are you there? Or was that a mistake? Because you put your hand back down. Feel free, anyone.
No worries, I guess. Should we go to the question in the chat? We have one from Scylla. She's asked, would you also include an increase in plus-size clothing in sustainable fashion, as the majority of plus sizes currently are only available from fast fashion companies?
Yeah, I think that's literally what the whole campaign is about. It's about inclusivity. It's about making sure that everyone is able to have access to good and sustainable fashion. So I think that's something that we as a company are working on. We will be having posts on ways that we can sort of signpost plus-size people. So then, there are resources, there are websites, there are shops that you can go to. Because I definitely do understand myself how hard it is trying to find clothes that do actually fit and are good for the environment. And I think there's a lack of discussion around that. And what tends to happen is that plus-size women or men, or just people in general, tend to get cut out from that discussion. Yeah, we definitely do want to be more inclusive and have more voices in our campaign.
Thank you for that.
Is there any other way to reuse clothing except from getting sustainable clothing?
Yeah, there are loads of different ways. So you can take clothes to charity shops, but actually a lot of clothes that are in charity shops end up going to landfill because a lot of people don't want to buy them, and I think it's a misconception buying second hand. But a lot of good ways to reuse clothes is to take up sewing and actually instead of just chucking things away, being creative. And I think this generation is really seeing a shift towards creativity. Instead of using something once and chucking it away, I think a lot of people are starting to, pick up sewing and actually fixing their clothes and being more conscious.
Just to add to that, I personally use Depop and Vinted myself, so if you guys are familiar with those apps, really recommend them. I found some great clothing items on them, and it's all kind of secondhand, but really good quality.
I mean, not to put everyone off, but Lashini doesn't have the best taste in fashion, so maybe you shouldn't follow her completely. But nevertheless, I completely agree. Depop, Vintage, any charitable organization is all for the greater cause, and sustainable fashion is a big part. And it all plays a big part to our environment and ensuring social equality across the world. So, if anyone else would like to ask a question, feel free to put your hands up. We're more than open to maybe one or two more questions until we go into the vote.
Also, if anyone's looking for an eye-opener, as the girls mentioned, I actually checked the label on my clothing for its polyester content. And I think it was like 80%, so that's quite a lot. If anyone else wants to check their tags right now, it's a really big eye-opener.
I don't think I can check any of my clothing because it's currently on me at the moment and I'm wearing a shirt and a tie.
Sorry. I am about the polyester thing. I think for every cycle of wash with materials like that, I think the number was 700,000 plastic fibers come out as a result of that. So yeah, it's definitely very scary when you think about those materials.
And I just wanted to pick up again about your point about how it goes, into the ocean, into fish, and obviously people that eat fish into our system. So that's a really great point to pick up on. Do we have any other participants who want to raise their hand? I've really enjoyed this session, guys. If you have any questions, please go ahead.
Personally, if you ask me, I think this whole campaign is amazing. Sustainable fashion is so important, not only for the environment but also for social equality, ensuring that TNCs don't exploit relaxed environmental laws in countries such as Bangladesh, India, China, Malaysia, Eastern countries often. Countries that have a developing economy and countries that are desperate for that economic stability. There are completely other ways around it. We need to ensure that countries aren't dependent on things that affect the environment and things that ultimately exploit workers' rights, but countries have more workers who are inside the knowledge economy, working in those higher paid sectors that allow the literacy rate to increase. So a good link to this whole campaign is allowing for equality to be to be spread across the world. So it's a real eye opener to what people within our community in a higher income country can do to help out people across the world who are less fortunate. So I advise, in my opinion, I would vote for this campaign, and I really do think everything that Fatima and her team are doing with the news to reuse is absolutely fantastic.
I completely agree. Just before we move on to voting, we have one question from Theo.
So yeah, no, I'd love to come in and ask an alternative perspective for someone who might come to a campaign and might say, oh, this is brilliant. It will definitely be phenomenal for the environment. But how would it be if you took the livelihood away from these countries? If you discourage people from into globalization, from going and helping not helping other countries, but buying from other countries, will this have a negative effect on their local area? Will this mean that we're taking jobs away from people? It's just an alternative perspective that some people may say. What would you say to that?
I think I'd say, for example, if you look at China, their SEZs, a lot of them are moving into more high-tech manufacturing or biomedical manufacturing, making stuff for mobile phones and laptops. So I think you wouldn't completely decimate the manufacturing industry. And plus, we've seen the global shift originally went to China, and then it moved to Indonesia, Bangladesh, as then they had lower wages even, sorry. So I do think that, yes, that part of the industry would go, the part that's reliant on the fashion industry. However, I do think like other industries exist, like for example, services as well. So I do think we'd see a shift, and as well, like people can be reskilled, retrained, and ultimately it would benefit them, since I think as well, like the conditions in the factories aren't good for their health. So even though it would be getting rid of that part of manufacturing, I do think the shift ultimately would improve their health and standard of living if we move towards a different type of manufacturing for them, I think.
Thank you so much for that. Guys, I'd love to debate this more and potentially debate the success of my own personal style.
I mean, I think we've come to a consensus. Everyone agrees with Tape on this one.
Okay,
Lashili is the least fashionable co-host here. So if we'd like to move on to the vote, Ahmed, I think if you could open the vote to everyone, that would be amazing. So we're getting all the votes in, and so far 100%, 13, 14, 15, 18, 20, 21. I'm not going to carry on counting because I'll lose my breath and probably pass out. But 100% so far, amazing.
Loving the energy with voting, guys. Keep it up.
The energy is important. I hope everyone's having an amazing day. We're going into the evening. This is an amazing event that we're hosting. I'll be honest, I'm proud of everything that everyone's doing, all the organisations that have come here to sit on the panel as guests and enlighten young people about the environment and what we can do. So, yeah, it's been amazing. We have 27 votes in so far, all 4 by the way. If anyone else is yet to vote, feel free to vote now. We have a minute left, a minute.
In the meantime, while you're voting, if you want to put down in the chat who you think has the better fashion taste, me or Tape, please go for it.
I mean,
I do.
That's very debatable, Jashini, but you know, if you want to, come on, fam, man, you can't back Jashini.
We appreciate the support.
Oh, I'm seeing a lot of Jashini. Oh my god. Thank you, Gary. Gary respects the suit, tie, and shirt game.
Guys, come on. Who has the best?
I'm seeing a bit of bias here.
What bias, Tape?
A Lashini bias.
I think they've all just gone to Specsavers and they've personally got amazing eyesight, so they can see.
30 people voted? No, 31. And the results are in. What's that? 97% for. Not even a landslide victory at this point. It's just a major win. So
I would love to see a sustainable fashion day.
100%.
Amazing.
100%. Amazing campaign.
Get our next pledge up to vote. Get voting, guys. So this is about the QR codes on clothing tags, and as Alice was talking about, this is about improving transparency and education for consumers, allowing them to know what's actually going on behind the production of their clothing. Amazing, we've got 100% for so far, keep going.
I mean, personally, I feel as if the QR tags are simply just an easy but effective way for TNCs to do their part in ensuring that consumers and customers are able to understand where their products have come from, what they're paying for, how it affects the environment, how it affects people in less income countries. So once again, if I was voting, I'd definitely vote for on this one. So I mean, that's just my input on it. Feel free to vote for, against, or abstain, whichever one. But at the moment we have 26 votes. 96% of them.
And the QR codes, you can have them physically on tags, but you can also have them on websites themselves. So when you think about online brands like PLT, Boohoo, you can scan your phone on the website itself and actually find out what's going on if you want to push these QR codes.
I really think, in developing world of technology, QR codes are becoming ever more popular in the world that we live in today. So, you know, seeing it on the high street, seeing it on online shopping, it's all in the best interest of our world. And at the end of the day, we are young people. The environment is going to affect us the most. So let's make change. Let's do this right now. Who stops us from making change in the world? No one but ourselves. So we're going to do this, and we're going to vote for this. What's it called again? Sorry, about function. Lashini?
What news is after this pledge?
Yeah, this pledge, that's the word. Don't worry, have a little slip up, but the energy's still there. The energy's still there.
Keep it, guys. Our poll was in.
96% for. Once again, the pledge goes through. Dave only speaks facts. Surat, what can I say, man? It's just, they call me a printer, you know?
I actually agree.
I think
Wikipedia who?
Moving on, we have our third pledge, and this one is about the government holding themselves accountable for environmental impacts that result from fast fashion production abroad. This is actually supporting countries, especially low-income countries, from Britain's position as a global leader. This one I think is really, really important because we have to hold global leaders account, and they have a lot of power in this industry. So it's really important that I hopefully want this pledge to go through.
So, ironically, recently I did an LSE Youth Model UN, and I was a part of the Economic and Social Council. I represented Bangladesh, and I was for all of these pledges, and we pushed forward similar things within our resolution. And ironically, I couldn't do that myself, so I had to create an alliance with the likes of Australia and the USA. And that in itself just goes to show, you know, as long as you have the backing of the high-income countries who are able to accept their wrongdoings and make amends, you know, for the future, for our future, I think that is the most important part. And at the end of the day, whilst it's true that we are the ones to make change, you know, in this world, we are the future. At the end of the day, we do have the government who make the who. Surat, stop! You're putting me off. Please, the government do make the decisions at the end of the day, and we need to lobby them and push them to make changes for the future and changes that are in the best interest of the next generation. So I feel as if this pledge should be put forward again. Feel free to vote whatever you feel as if, but I agree with Ashini for once. And I disagree with quite a few people who said that her fashion sense is a bit better than mine. A bit rude. Confidence isn't hurt, you know, energy's still there, but we move.
Okay, that only speaking facts about my fashion sense. So, are we ready for the poll to be closed to find the results? We have 100% for this pledge. That's a really, really great result, and I'm really happy about the amazing session that we've had so far. Thank you so much to Alice, Fatima, Serena, Annabelle, Ola and Abby. This has been a really, really amazing session. Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed it. I think Taper's really enjoyed it.
Of course, always. Thank you, Lashini, my amazing but lesser co-host with Fashion Sense. And I think we should pass it on to Hamad, who I think will be hosting the BYC. So Hamad, over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dave and Lashini. Do you know what, Dave? I think I've got to back you on that fashion sense. Your suit is looking fly. All right, let's get down to business then. BYC. I know a lot of you might be wondering, who on earth are the BYC? The BYC describe themselves as an organisation that aims for a world in which every young person is empowered to create social and political change. They run the biggest youth parliament projects in the youth engagement projects in the UK, including the UK Youth Parliament, NHS Youth Forum, Academic Youth Forum, Youth Search Committee, Youth Ambassadors to the Commonwealth, and European Youth Forum. And they will be using their wide range of consultations to present just how youth representation can be achieved in climate talks and more. So without any further disruptions, let me pass on to the BYC.
Thank you, Mad. We're so excited to be here. I'm Scylla. I'm a trustee from the BYC. Yeah, I'll pass it on to Sylvia so we can all introduce ourselves. So Sylvia, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Sylvia. I am the UK Young Ambassador to the European Youth Forum, which put very kind of briefly is the world's biggest collection of youth councils. So I represent all you lovely people, whether you like it or not, but I hope I do a good job. And I'm here today to kind of present things from the European Youth Forum side of things, and I'll pass over to Elif, who's kind of like my assistant ambassador. We do slightly different jobs.
Thank you. I like the referral as a sister ambassador. That's very nice. Yeah, I'm Elif, and I am the UK Youth Ambassador to the Commonwealth. So similar to what Sylvia does, I'm in a team of another person as well, lovely Namia, who could not be here tonight. And we represent you guys in the Commonwealth, especially the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which is happening in June, and at the Commonwealth Youth Forum as well, where we represent young people in the UK in the body of the Commonwealth.
So we have a kind of eclectic mix of pledges to put to you, based upon the BYC manifesto, the European Youth Forum kind of ideas and pledges, same with the Commonwealth. I think we'll start with Scylla and the BYC's points, and then we'll pass over to the rest of us.
Thanks, Sylvia. So our chair, Sarah Staples, was supposed to be here tonight, unfortunately she's unwell, so I'm going to be taking over the BYC segment of tonight. The BYC, as Hamad brilliantly explained, is basically a charity that is all about young people. That's what we do, youth engagement, that's our specialty. So I've got 3 points here tonight that I think are really important, and also our members think are really important because they voted on it to be part of our manifesto. So the first is about Greenfield Sites, the second is about fossil fuels, and the third is about sustainable menstrual products. So first, Greenfield Sites. Young people need space for their future, and that by building on Greenfield Sites, their future is imperiled. There are currently many derelict brownfield sites that could be used for building, resulting in less damage to existing habitats and wildlife. So, some of you may be wondering, what is a brownfield site, what is a greenfield site? A brownfield site is a site that has been built on before. It's normally associated with urban areas. A greenfield site is a site that has not been built on before, often rural, countryside areas. Essentially, redeveloping brownfield sites eases pressure on greenfield sites and is much more sustainable. And also, adding on to an earlier point made by the Northern Ireland team, wanting an increase in public transport, providing public transport networks is easier in central areas where the population densities are high, if we keep building on these brownfield sites that are already being used. So the second point is about fossil fuels. We must leave 4/5 of all existing fossil fuels in the ground, as agreed way back in COP21. This is quite self-explanatory in my opinion. We must not only hold the UK government accountable to this, but we expect to see fossil fuel alternatives to be used much more frequently to power the country. And third is about sustainable menstrual products. So, manufacturers of menstrual products must make their products more sustainable, predominantly through the reduction of plastic that is used, while also ensuring that they are affordable to young people. We also call for manufacturers to list the materials used in their products on the product packaging to allow young people to make a more informed choice surrounding their menstrual products, as this isn't currently part of the UK law. So, just for some context, over 200,000 tonnes of waste from menstrual products end up in landfills every year, taking up to hundreds of years to break down. A conventional pack of pads has the equivalent amount of plastic with 5 carrier bags, and this works out to about 2.5 grams of plastic for each pad and the packaging. So just a fun fact, although I don't think it's fun at all, that 2.5 grams for each pad builds up a lot, with 4.3 billion disposable menstrual products being used every year in the UK alone. So that really makes a difference when looking at the whole country. So that's all from the BYC. I'll pass over to Sylvia to carry on.
Hi, so my pledges focus more on the YFJ, which is the kind of acronym for European Youth Forum. We have done multiple surveys, I say we, I only joined in October, but the European Youth Forum has spent years and years and years asking young people across Europe what they want. And the overwhelming thing is they want a voice, and it's such a basic request. But young people perceive climate change as a top priority. We know that. We know that from this year's Make You Mark, which was done by the British Youth Council and the UK Youth Parliament. Young people have to be the key actors, and tackling climate change should come from a youth perspective. There's no point a load of 50, 60-year-olds sitting around a table if the youth voice is not there. We want decisive and immediate action with concrete and binding plans. We don't want wishy-washy language or vague promises. We need action because our house is on fire. With those things in mind, I present 2 pledges to you. Number 1, there should be a specific negotiator at COP26 dedicated to representing the views of young people. They would consult widely with young people before November and sit around the main negotiating table. We don't want them at kind of offset and off group, put in a corner. We want them around the main table because it is our futures. We are the ones who are going to have to live with the consequences of the action that is taken now or the action that is not taken. Because from what I can tell, very little is being done and it's on our shoulders that it's going to fall. We need a voice around that table who listens to us before they get in there. Number 2, which kind of is in keeping with a lot of the themes from this evening, is about choice. I recently went vegan because I thought it would be a helpful thing for the planet, and whilst I think it is, I read something on social media a couple of weeks ago that told me that the asparagus I had just bought was far worse for the planet than the British beef that I could have bought. Now, if I'd have known that, I wouldn't have bought the asparagus, because I'm trying to make choices that are good for the planet, and I'm not saying you should eat asparagus, you should eat beef, that's not my point. My point is, we need food packaging that has carbon output labels on it. How are we to make informed choices about our purchases, the power of which we know is huge, purchase power is massive, if we don't have the data available to us? So on packaging there should be nutritional information, as there already is, and carbon output. I'm not talking about tax, because that would kind of hit the poorest of our society. I'm merely talking about giving people the choice, the kind of information, so that they are able to make choices about what they consume. So that's what I'm pledging, and I'll pass on to Elif.
Thank you. I was getting carried away with the passion that you spoke with. It was very powerful. Yeah, well, I think from my perspective as the UK Youth Ambassador to the Commonwealth Youth Forum and Commonwealth Youth Council, 31 of the world's 39 small states are Commonwealth members. So it is very much them facing the beginning of what is happening and what will be the future emergency for everybody else who hasn't directly been impacted by yet, I suppose, in terms of small states being slowly but surely being put underwater and people losing their jobs, their lives, their houses, their heritage. So my pledge that we came up with as a team was that we wanted to introduce a climate crisis fact-checking service on social media. So if you are one of the 2.45 billion monthly users of Facebook services, which I for sure am, unfortunately, I wish I did it less than I actually did. Anyway, you will have probably seen the COVID information, click here, when you see like a meme about COVID-19. And we're suggesting something really similar for climate change. How is the climate crisis any different to the pandemic that we're facing today? People's lives are ending similarly to COVID-19 because of the climate crisis, and that will only continue if we allow misinformation to be spread about the climate crisis, like how we see with denial, like how we see with wild conspiracies, and basically our idea was just to address this, and whenever something comes up about the climate crisis, whether there's any kind of information, whether it's positive or negative or factual or not factual, I was going to say something very strong there, not factual, then it would have a sign directing to perhaps the government's website on Climate Change Explained page, which is an informational page that is very direct, very factual, very statistical, that is all about the climate crisis. So linking people there to information, because ultimately social media connects people to information, it connects billions of people to information, and we really need to tap into that, like social media has been forced to because of the pandemic. It would use the same infrastructure as what is being used now, with the independent fact-checking services that they have at the moment, and independent fact-checkers. And yeah, this would really as well be part of the Commonwealth Youth Council's pledges to try and introduce information about how to deal with the effects of the climate crisis, since it's very much in our midst right now, so dealing with extreme heat, floods, etc. So tie in statistical, factual information with really helpful information what to do if you're in a situation where you're having to deal with the effects of the climate crisis. So yeah, that is my pledge, and we've talked about all our pledges, so I don't know if anybody's got anything else to say from my team, but if not, then we can go to Q&A.
Yeah, that sounds fine by me. Should we pass back to Hamad?
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, everyone, and some really, truly very insightful ideas and points there. I'm sure our attendees would agree. Do we have any questions or any contributions from anyone on the floor? Don't leave me hanging, guys. Come on. All right, maybe everyone's just been a bit shy. I'll get the ball rolling, and maybe we can then get some more attendees. Start asking questions. So, on one of your pledges, you talked about using more sustainable products to make more sustainable materials to make menstrual products. Just sort of playing devil's advocate here, really, to be honest with you, but some people might argue that if we do use that, then they'll get more and more expensive, which will make it more and more inaccessible for poorer people. What would your point be to that?
I buy completely cardboard-based menstrual products from Aldi, and they are cheaper than the leading brand. So I'd say I think it's a really, really valid point, but it is possible to be done. Aldi do it, so shop at Aldi. So anything else to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, with every kind of market, there's always the very expensive, kind of expensive, average, not expensive. There's different levels. So really, just with sustainable menstrual products, there's going to be different prices. So if you shop at Aldi, like Sylvia does, you're going to get a different price to if you, shop at Waitrose. That's just classic. Even with the carrots, even with toilet paper, you're going to get different prices everywhere. So there's always going to be that market for expensive products and cheap products.
Yeah, that's the answer there, I think. Finally, we've got someone to bail me out. Olivia, do you want to unmute and say your point?
Yeah, so one of your pledges is that the government has to regulate labelling of carbon footprints on all food produce. I think that is quite a good idea, but I guess some people could argue that it's just another way to kind of make consumers feel guilty for what they're consuming, and it can also contribute to climate anxiety and how a lot of people feel worried about where their food is coming from and make them just feel a bit helpless. So do you think that there's anything governments can kind of do to ensure that the food we are consuming is sustainable and not contributing that much to climate change?
That's a really, really good point, and I think climate anxiety is really, really valid, and we need to really focus on that because it's so easy to feel overwhelmed by it. The point that I would make with the marketing surrounding that change, it would be a huge change that was pushed through. There'd be a big campaign on it, would focus on the empowerment of the choice, and kind of, I don't want to say spin, but sell it that way. And I don't think it should be about making people feel bad at all. And I think we should steer away actually from the green, yellow, red labelling that you see on nutrition. I don't think that's helpful personally. I think you see red, you think bad. I think the way you marketed that and the images chosen will be really, really powerful. I would go for a footprint, and the size of the footprint would determine the carbon output as a way to steer around that. But I do think that's a really, really valid point, and that maybe will be something that was thought about and consulted with as the process developed.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Any more questions? And just to remind everyone, the pledges are in the chat if you've forgotten them. Yes, Mia, can we have Mia for a question, please? Yeah, go ahead, Mia.
So, what's also affecting global warming is the amount of plastic bags that's produced by shops. And the way how they could do that is sell less plastic bags and try to get more onto paper ones as well, because normally loads of people tend to have plastic bags, and that can be very bad for the environment, because what are you going to do after? Because there's only so much you can reuse it, and then it gets damaged and it's end up going to go to waste.
Yeah, sorry, I can see Sylvia, you've taken your mic off.
Oh, I'm usually waiting to see you guys.
I was just going to say that that's a really good point. I think ultimately the pledges that we're making, and I think the pledges that are being spoken about throughout this session, has been kind of just about making more sustainable choices, and ultimately we're empowered by the education that we have and the information that we have. Knowing when something's unsustainable, knowing where you can make slightly better choices, obviously considering your own situation that you're in, is really empowering and really good for the environment. Not, of course, ignoring how the climate crisis is not necessarily the responsibility of individual people. It should be in the responsibility of businesses. And I guess just definitely, and being powered by your own knowledge as well is a really important thing in this topic. Sylvia, sorry, do you want to jump in?
That's exactly what you said. I'll second that.
I'd just like to add, also paper bags is a brilliant idea, and it increases accessibility because it's free compared to the reusable bags that are very much not free. So yeah, I definitely love that point.
That's a nice point to be made. And we're looking for some more nice questions. So anyone else? All right, let's go to the Theo. Theo, you there?
Amazing. I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely brilliant. And by the way, can I just say, we have a future leader in Mia. I think she's absolutely amazing. I think your contributions have been brilliant. You'll be a world leader, you will. Phenomenal. But now on to my actual question for the BYC is, I think the one I absolutely adore, one of your pledges, is the one about getting someone at the table who's responsible for getting young people's voices heard. And this is like in the ethos of all of us here, right? We want young people's voices to matter. And this is absolutely brilliant. Now, I've got a question for you. In the campaigning experience, what is the difference between having somebody in government who is responsible for young people's voices at the table, or a young person themselves around the table? What is the difference, and why would we want people then? Yeah, that's my question.
I think that's a really, really interesting kind of viewpoint to look at things from. I think for me the difference would be that a young person is sitting there and knowing that it's literally their future that they are debating. My mum said to me all the time, well, I'm really concerned about it, but at the end of the day I won't be around really for the consequences, whereas I will. And I think that's really powerful. And it's not to say that someone who's older couldn't do a good job. But if this was passed, I personally would be pushing for that person in question to be a young person, whether that be 30 and under, 25 and under. I think the younger the better, really, because we are the ones with the passion, with the fire, with the spark. And I think that applies to so many young people, as is shown with the turnout here. And I think there's multiple ways that could be implemented. Someone maybe who was elected by BYC, within the BYC network, there's so many young people who are elected in different ways because they have the mandate to represent young people. But I think we could open it up to the general public and say, hey, who wants to give this a shot? Who would be interested? And we'd have to read the wording really and the requirements and what the COP26 requires. But I think that's a really good point and a really good angle to look at things from.
Young people are so vital in this conversation. We have a really unique perspective, I think, especially on climate change, because it's an issue. It's a rare issue where it requires an international cooperation, international solutions, and as the most connected globally generation. That doesn't even make sense, but globally connected generation. We have more sympathy for international projects, international schemes, other countries. So we'd really be all for international cooperation in comparison to some other generations that might hold back from those kind of schemes.
Definitely, that one is definitely one of the best. I think pledges are here and incredibly important. Do we have any other questions? Any other points? Anyone else there to pay me out? Oh, hand up. Yes, can we get Naga's to, I butchered that name, I know, but can we get them to speak, please?
That's fine. So my name just fine, thank you. First of all, I commend you guys for what you're saying. This isn't really a question rather than just an interesting point. So a lot of times people say, oh, young people, I might hear people say that people don't deserve a place at the table because they're too immature, or they don't know enough yet, or they're not experienced enough. But the way I see it is that young people have a tendency to ask fundamental questions, which remind people higher up about what their priorities should be. And just getting that different perspective is so important. I just wondered if you guys had any. I just wanted to share that primarily, but do you guys have any points on that?
I love that. I love you sharing that with us. Because, yeah, and I think just on the last question as well, I remember being in school and feeling really worried about our future as globally for the planet because of the climate crisis or climate change. And I think that that's a really unique perspective that we have as young people. And I think the idea that we ask really fundamental questions is also, I think, maybe people fear that we ask far too frank questions because we are afraid for our futures, as Sylvia put it. And I think that can be kind of daunting if it's an issue that is, potentially people don't want to deal with at these big round tables where lots of interests are involved, but ultimately, yeah, young people sitting at the table and saying, I don't care about any kind of vested interest, I just want to have a future and I want to know that future generations will have a future on the planet as well. What could be more important than our future on the planet? And I think, yeah, I agree. I think young people have that passion and drive that can be kind of intimidating. Yeah. Sorry, Zilla, go ahead.
No, you literally summed it up perfectly. Thanks, Olivia.
I mean, I think it's sad we're having to even have this conversation. In an ideal world, someone would have realised that young people should be at that table. But if they haven't realised, then we'll let them know. I think that's what this evening's all about. But yeah, thanks for that contribution, really, really valuable.
Brilliant. The diversity of opinions is always incredibly important. We should be there, no doubt. Do we have any other points or questions? If not, then we can. Anyone at all? Still last few minutes, last options. Alright, I think I'm going to take that as a definite silence. Can we go on to the polls? Can we get the polls up for pledges? There we go. So, young people need space for their future, and that by building Greenfield Sites, their future is imperiled. There are currently many derelict Brownfield sites that could be used for building, resulting in less damage to existing habitats and wildlife. If you agree, smash that for button. If you disagree, smash that against button. And if you abstain, then smash that abstain button. Well, right now we've got 90. This could just be unanimous, which would be something. 100%. Is anyone with that ratio? No. Vote now if you don't agree. That is a very popular pledge by the looks of it. We've still got some people left. Come on, let's have 100% vote to stand out. This isn't the general election. Okay, cool. Brilliant. I think we're going to close it there. There we go. That passes with a completely unanimous vote. I'm sure the Rossi will be incredibly happy with that. Let's get the second one on then. So, we must leave 4/5 of all existing fossil fuels in the ground as agreed in COP21, the one previous to the one that will happen in November. What does everyone say? Ooh, I'm abstaining. It's not going to be entirely unanimous. Let's get it up. Ooh, 60, come on. Where are the votes?
Give us your votes! As young people, we never get to vote. Give us your votes!
Come on. Oh, and against. And against.
Hey, hold on a second.
Drama.
I want to show you how you can build an entire online business with mugs. In fact,
Okay, so a bit more diversity, although a landslide nevertheless so far, unless we have a massive shift to something else. Alright, come on guys, last few seconds. That's the music. The music needs to hurry up. And it looks like the landslide so far. Cool. Well, there are the results. Not unanimous this time, but it's still a landslide. Can we get the next ones up? There we are.
See this mug right here? I don't own it.
What's that? Okay. So this one, requirements for manufacturing of menstrual products to make their products more sustainable, predominantly through the reduction of plastic use while ensuring that they are affordable.
And yet I make passive income.
Everyone in favour?
Like clockwork
Vote
all the
for.
time. Hi, my name is Dave
Anyone
Kenner,
against,
and I am
or
a
anyone who wants to
mugpreneur.
stir up any drama? Vote against. And that's it. I'm abstain. You know what I'm starting to realise about you guys? You know that's starting to get boring. What's all this going for everything? Where's the drama?
It's like they want to save the planet.
It's almost like they care. Who's for? Young people caring.
Yeah, you've taken quite the chaotic neutral stance on this voting situation.
All fun against.
What is this lovely music in the background?
You're gonna get copyrighted, guys.
Hopefully not.
Alright, let's keep this going. 22. Okay, cool. At least there's one person that enjoys some wrong. And there we go! Another landslide from the BYC. They are just smashing these ladies.
What can I say?
It's almost as if they paired for this event. Let's go on to the next one then. The government must regulate the labelling of carbon footprints on all food products. What do you think about that? So far, a resounding 4.
See this mug right here?
Big love to everyone who's followed our
own it.
Twitter page, by the way.
I don't inventory
The person who manages it, it's very appreciated. Keep them coming. And Instagram.
Yeah, also the Instagram manager, really appreciates all the Instagram followers that she's getting on her phone right now. Thank you. Yeah.
Stuff. I feel like there's just like 2 people that just either go against or abstain for the banter. Just because there needs to be some diversity. And if you are there, and if you are doing that, I'm not gonna lie, I appreciate that because you've given me something to talk about.
Abstaining is very misleading.
Well, what's going to be happening right now?
Right, brilliant.
Keep voting.
Another landslide. BYC is destroying this. Yes, okay, I think we have one more pledge there from the BYC?
There might be 2, I'm afraid.
Alright. No bad.
Also, just if I could, for a moment, just hype the consultation that we will be doing as UK Ambassadors, where we're trying to just get young people's opinions about their most important issues at the moment. That includes climate change. It includes lots of very important issues that we want to take to our international tables, me and Sylvia. So if you want to take part in that consultation, similar to how you're voting right now, if you love that action, if you love abstaining just for fun, this is for you, and it will be on our social media. That means Sylvia run. So look out for that if you're interested. And thank you for voting on this current poll.
Okay, when I said that it'd be nice to have the people abstaining and going against are giving you something to talk about, I didn't mean that now all you have to do is abstain or go against. Like, if you're genuinely for it, go for it. What I'm saying is, better not just be let's get them hard talking. Abstain votes. nevertheless, it's not like the pledge isn't going to go through so far. The BYC have clearly done a good job with their consultations.
Can you have that in writing, please?
Social media.
Well, they have been voted already by our members, so they are, foolproof, basically.
Are you just saying that you're here for the fame?
No, this pledge actually, this one, the carbon labelling and the seat at the table, they are all new ideas. They've never been voted on before, so that's exciting. You're the first people ever to vote on these BYC ideas.
So get
Just look at that. Just look at how special you guys are. And another landslide, although a bit more abstainees this time. Maybe BYC needs to be a bit more convincing. Alright, let's get on to the next one. I swear there was one more. Yeah, there is. Okay, so there to be a dedicated negotiator at COP26, responsible for representing the views of young people. They are to consult widely with young people for November and be around the main negotiation table. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to be quite okay. I'm now surprised that someone's gone against that.
Someone's gone against that. What's there to go against?
I'd like to have a discussion about that.
Can I ask the tech team if we have a 50-year-old in the attendees? Who against? Thanks. Maybe we should have a better vetting system to make sure everyone is young.
I'll have that type of music.
That's pretty convincing last night so far. Gary there supplying us with some brilliant English in the sense. There we go. That is the last pledge, I think. And with that, it seems the BYC have got on with their pledges through, so go the BYC.
Thank you. This is amazing.
That also means that you're not going to get me anymore, so have fun with that, and I will have a much needed break from all the excitement we've had in the voting drama. So yeah. I will now hand over to our next few hosts.
Whoa, can you hear that noise? Did you guys hear that?
Yeah. What is that, Theo?
What's that about?
What's that?
Oh my days, is it
Giveaway.
giveaway time?
No.
Woo!
Yes, sir.
And what are we giving away today?
You tell us, what are we giving away today?
Guys, come on, we're giving away trees.
Yes!
We get trees, right? The only trees we're gonna get is broccoli, right? This is Madagascar. And also, like, this is gonna have such a big impact on the community and environment, right? And if I see no hashtags, guess what? We're not just I'll chop down trees, right? If I don't get this hashtag, I'm gonna go on a vengeance.
Oh, he's gonna go on a rampage.
That gets me. So, I'm going to give you some time now, and I'm going to kind of muddle it up a bit, right? I want to see in that Twitter mentions who's going to put hashtag see-through plastic, right? One of the group, can you put it in the chat? Mariam, are you excited for this?
Of course, who isn't? You know what, on Twitter I've just been going at it, see-through plastic, because we need to get this message out there, With enough hype, we can get on the BBC, we can get on ITV. I don't know what everyone's doing. Come on, people. Come on, we're just slacking at this. Come on. We're young people, we're always hyper. Come on.
Guys, guess what? I've just gone on Twitter. Hashtag see-through plastic is a trending hashtag.
Cheers.
No way.
UK trending. This is phenomenal. This is brilliant stuff. And yeah, let's see if we can get it. Do you know how it says number? It says like number 10, number whatever. We are trending, but let's get a number by our side. Let's try and get that number 10.
Come on.
Soon come. All we need to do as a collective group, group of young people dedicated to change, all we need to do is use this hashtag, get it trending, get other social influencers on this, and soon come, we're going to be changing the world. So, I encourage everyone, for the sake of this giveaway and for the sake of our future, to use the hashtag #SeafoodPlastic on Twitter and on any other social media platform. Feel free to use on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm sure we'll be able to make amazing change for the environment and for our futures real soon. So, Theo, do you have an update as to who has won this giveaway?
You know what I want to do? First of all, I haven't even decided. How many trees are we giving away? How many trees should we give away?
How many trees? Let me think about this one. Let me think about this one. I'm feeling.
Put your hand up if you've tweeted about it, right? And if I don't see your hand up, I'm going to remove you from... No, I'm not. Raise your hand if you're tweeting about this stuff. Yeah, Dave, what are you thinking?
All I'm saying is, I'm thinking a cool little... What are we saying? 9 crown.
Ooh! I like that.
Actually, how you want to go high? I'm saying, I'm liking the look of a young, what are you saying? 17.
17.
A young 17, you hear me?
17, is that good?
17 is more than good.
Is that good?
To make change.
Let's go for a big 17. Right, I want to ask a couple people in the chat. Simran, why haven't you tweeted about it, right? We got Roo, we got Haroon. Why are you not tweeting about it, man? You're not seeing your hands up in the chat.
You just gotta be bailed out like that. If you're not participating, engaging into the movement, do it now, man. Do it now.
Come on, this is where we get our voice heard. We are young people. Every word we speak is of value. Come on, people. Come on.
You got this. Don't worry, Simran and Haroon. You can on Instagram and you can back the cause on there. I'm not that active on Twitter, but I'm doing my best to share it to my friends, sharing on Instagram. So, you know, every little bit of participation helps the cause of changing the environment and helping our future. Anyone who doesn't have Twitter, feel free to do it on Instagram, or just spread the word to your friends and your families, and we'll be making change real soon.
100% Instagram is a great place to put forward this message, put on your stories and everything, share out there with your friends.
Also,
it's important.
Whilst on the topic of Instagram, what are we trying to plug? Are we trying to
Yeah, come on.
Plug. Everyone go on your Instagram right now and follow @LondonNYP. Someone put it in the chat for me, please. Someone put it in the chat.
I'll be putting it in the chat right now.
Also, another young plug. So what are we saying? What are we trying to get more followers on the mental health charter? Does someone want to plug that as well at the mental health charter?
If you're concerned about your well-being, when you're worried about climate change and you're worried that the government aren't representing you as a young person, if you are concerned about your mental health when it comes to climate change issues, then follow the mental health charter.
There you go, young plug. So we're coming back in from the BYC to the mental health charter. We're all making change for young people, the environment, any upcoming issues. After all, we were the ones who brought back the zip cards as well.
Come on.
We got the power, young people, you know. As you can see, Tape's back, the best host is back.
Unfortunately, I was really happy for Lashini, you know.
I've come back better and bigger, you know. I've come with a blazer. Everyone was coming at me for my fashion taste, and so I come with a blazer, you know, a little bit of black, you know. You can never go wrong with black. See?
Are you ready for the giveaway?
Giveaway, let's go. 17 trees.
Final refresh, yeah? I'm gonna put it on top as well, so it spices up a bit rather than
17 trees. Theo, tell me now, who is the lucky winner of 17 trees?
You never guess who it is, right?
Who is it? Olivia. Come on, man, not Olivia. Round of applause.
Olivia, well done. 2 trees in your name.
Thank you.
17 trees. You know what? We're gonna get in contact with you. We're gonna let you know the progress of it. Obviously, all thanks to Charles and phenomenal, like genuinely phenomenal. You're tweeting, Olivia, yours is what's going to get us at COP26. Because when the government does that refresh, for some reason it comes at the top. So it shows that
we've got the voice and we are the young people, that's all I have to say.
Before I go, we'll have one more giveaway, right? And that'll be at the end of the day. So keep at it, and this time I won't do the most recent person, I'll just do someone who's been doing it throughout, right? So you better be doing it throughout rather than just at the end, right? That's enough for me. Good luck, Tate and Mariam, the host of the...
Thank you, Theo.
Thank you,
Now,
Theo. Thank
let's
you.
introduce our guests. Our guests are part of the panel. We will be having Kingston and Richmond Youth Council. So, a quick little summary from me and Mariam. I'll give a bit of briefing, and Mariam will give examples as to what Kingston and Richmond Youth Council have done. Kingston and Richmond Youth Council is a group of democratically elected young people in the boroughs of Kingston and Richmond. They work on several issues for young people, including climate change, hence why we're here today. Now, Mariam, if you'd like to give a little bit of an introduction as to what they've done so far.
Of course, so recently they have run their own climate conference in which they saw the David Attenborough attend. They have also held 2 major consultations on climate change within the boroughs, and they have made a podcast on climate change and the actions that we can take. They have been given grants for local climate change projects in the area.
So, representatives from the Kingston and Richmond Youth Council, if you would like to start presenting.
Hi everyone, thank you so much. The host is blocking me from putting my video on.
We'll get that fixed, just go ahead.
Thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Lydia Roebuck. I'm the chair of the Kingston and Richmond Youth Council. Isabella, if we could just get our PowerPoint slide presentation up, that would be great, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just start showing my screen now. It says that my video has been blocked, but and I have screen share disabled as well, so...
Lydia and Isabella, I think you've been made co-hosts now, so you both can feel free to turn on your cameras and present your screen.
Okay, yeah. So I'll share my screen now. There it is. So, can you see that?
Perfect, thank you. So as I said before, hi everyone, I'm Lydia and I'm the chair, and we're here today to talk about our pledges. So just to begin with, I'd like to give the rest of the KRYC members here tonight a chance to introduce themselves. So Isabella, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hello, I'm Isabella and I am a member of the Kingston Richmond Youth Council, and specifically I'm the treasurer.
Thank you. Ariana?
Hi, I'm Ariana and I manage the social media for Kingston and Richmond Youth Council.
Thank you. Praneeth?
Hey, I'm Praneeth. I'm the publicity manager of the KRYC.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth and I am also head of social media for the Kingston Richmond Youth Council here.
Thank you. I'd just like to say thank you very much for having us. We're really excited to present our pledges and our ideas. So Isabella, if you wouldn't mind just moving on to the next slide, please. So you already heard a little bit about us, but I just wanted to give you guys some more detail. So as stated before, we're a democratically elected group of young people. So in 2019, we applied to be part of the Youth Council. We went through a campaigning process for 2 weeks, travelling around our local area to get the votes of young people. And so once we were elected, we took on the responsibility for representing young people's views in our borough on a variety of subjects and doing a variety of topics. So we've got quite a good equal balance of members from Kingston and Richmond, which allows us to make accurate decisions and choices for both boroughs as we are across both boroughs. And even throughout lockdown, we've been working really hard to improve our local area, and we've been maintaining our schedule to ensure that we can improve the lives for young people in our local area, even during lockdown. So yeah, thank you. I'd just like to pass over to Praneeth just to give some more detail about the work that we're currently doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Lydia. I still can't start my video, so just excuse me for that. So we are heavily involved in the climate change work. Thank you. We are heavily involved in the climate change work because as a Kingston and Richmond Youth Council, we are dedicated to fighting climate change. For example, we took part in facilitating workshops and focus groups in the 2019 Richmond Climate Change Summit, and as mentioned before, we even got to meet the David Attenborough. We also do our little bit to help the environment, like going paperless for our documents since 2019 and appropriately recycling all our waste after meetings. We have also published a podcast episode all about climate change. Isabella, who will speak later, it was part of that, and the QR code is at the end of the slide, so if anyone wants to listen to that, Spotify, it's on there. And we even conducted a Kingston climate change survey to give us a greater insight into the behaviors of young people regarding climate change. The KYC are also now organizing a project that aims to grant a sum of money to individual groups to fund a project relating to the climate change. And I would like to pass it on to Elizabeth to explain our pledges.
Hi, so here are the pledges. So the first pledge, which my other members of the Youth Council are going to go into greater depth on a bit later. So the first one is to put the climate in all the decisions, like at the forefront of all of the decisions made with the government, with environmental impacts made public, and then introducing a car-free day scheme nationally, spending more money on the environment rather than our other areas, and increasing climate tax and penalties on large organisations. So yeah, over to.
I'm doing the next one.
Yeah, sorry.
So, it's okay. So, our first pledge is to put the climate in all of the decisions made. So that means that the government should always make sure that they're considering the climate and the environment when they're making decisions. So when we did our podcast a while ago, we did it with Joe Crabtree, who is the Member of Youth Parliament for Richmond, who some of you might know. And in the episode, he suggested that we all take the environment as a main factor when we make decisions. So this is very useful in day-to-day life. So the examples he was giving is, if you're buying something, you should make sure that it's not going to harm the environment. Take the time to find a more sustainable version. And even with travel, you should make sure that you travel in the most environmentally friendly way possible. But it also is very useful if you then apply it to the decisions that the government make. So I did some research, and the UK has declared a climate emergency, and so have many other boroughs. So surely if it was to be an emergency, and which it is, then it should be taken into account as a priority in all decisions being made. But currently, as far as I'm aware, that isn't being done, even though it has been described as an emergency. So what we're asking the government to do is to, when they make a decision, when they write out the report, to also write as part of that report, or as a separate report, the environmental impacts of the decision they would be making. So listing the harm that it would do to the environment. Because by doing that, it might make them think twice about the decisions they're making to make sure that they don't have detrimental consequences on the environment and that it doesn't cause unnecessary harm by making sure that they take it into account before. So the next pledge is going to be about car-free day, so I'm going to pass you over to Lydia for that.
Thank you, Isabella. So when we were discussing and brainstorming our pledges, and generally throughout the time that we've spent campaigning for climate change, we sort of wanted to do something or have an initiative which could be implemented by people across the UK. So we realised that small changes in people's lives can make such a drastic difference. So this pledge would basically introduce a car-free day nationally. So this car-free day would essentially entail a day where people would be encouraged to not use their cars. And although this may not seem like it would have a massive impact, it would be an opportunity to educate people nationally about the impacts of using your car and other alternatives. And it could encourage a catalyst effect for other people to possibly consider in greater depth how they use vehicles and that impact on the environment, because we felt that it was really important that people in their own lives, as previously stated in the previous pledge, to have people to really consider what they're doing in their own lives, and having this as a national scheme could not only highlight the importance of climate change to people across the country, but also educate people and possibly encourage them to think about their decisions and what they're doing for the climate. And also, it would just be a great opportunity to highlight to people the other alternatives than using your car, which may be cheaper and better for you. So, thank you. I'd now like to pass over to Ariana to talk about our next pledge.
So I will be discussing how the government should spend more money on the environment rather than other areas. So in November 2020, Rishi Sunak presented the spending review, and foreign aid was slashed from 0.7% to 0.5%. Also in November, the defence budget was boosted by 21.9 billion, and it has been proven that defence spending is the most profligate and unproductive form of spending. So why should we throw money at defence in a pandemic where opposing groups have set aside their differences in order to fight a shared viral enemy? Isn't it time to end wars and seize the creation of shiny new weapons to destroy humanity when the old ones work just fine? If we are cutting aid for innocents suffering in war-torn predicaments, we should at least cut spending on the wars that created their pitiful situations in the first place by an equal proportion. So, this money can be transferred to rebuild and preserve the world we live in today, for example by subsidising electric cars, which increases their accessibility to those on lower incomes and further positive externalities on society. You could also use that money to rebuild and restructure flooding barriers and aid the preservation of natural habitats. So let's rebuild and not destroy. Thank you. Now we'll pass them on to Praneeth.
So our fourth and final pledge is that we have to increase the climate tax on large organizations. It's not that there isn't any climate tax on large organizations already. I mean, there are two big names in this field, and that's the EU ETI, which is how the emissions trading, and the streamlined energy and carbon reporting that is specific to the UK. But as you can see from the infographic I put up there, although the way that the EU ETI works, it is working, and they're cutting down the carbon emissions, I feel that if you go on to the next slide, there are some places where I've circled things. For example, I find it completely ridiculous that companies they have to earn more than $38 million to actually be considered into these plans. I think that should be lowered, and therefore put more people responsible for the damage they're causing to our environment. And the fines are up to 50K, which, if you look at the previous figure of 38 million, doesn't really make a lot of sense. Shouldn't it be a bit more? Maybe even double, so that it actually has like a noticeable impact on the company. And I think that so when we're saying increasing the climate tax, I really want the companies that are abusing our environment, our resources, everything from the planet, I want them to sort of pay back that in monetary, because that's the only language they'll understand. So that's why I think that that's what we think that the climate tax on large organizations should be increased. I'll pass on to Lydia.
Thank you very much, Praneeth. So that concludes our pledges. Thank you very much for listening. Just on the screen, we've got linked below our social media and email address if you'd like to give us a follow, just to see the updates of what we're doing and any future surveys that are going to be coming out.
Lydia, feel free, if you can, to put both your Twitter, your email, and your Instagram in the chat so everyone can just find it right there.
I will, thank you. And then in the top corner is just a QR code to our climate change podcast, which we just completed. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
If you could stop presenting, Lydia, there you go, thank you very much. Now, if you go into the Q&A part of it, I see we have a few hands raised. Nages, again, you have your hand up. If you are already a panelist, feel free to unmute your mic, and if not, we'll get someone to make you a panelist.
Yeah, hello everyone. Again, amazing presentation, guys. That was really amazing to see. Just a question on the tax one. do you think that introducing more taxes would basically lead companies to increase the what's the word for it, the price of their products, which then affects consumers, which we don't really want to do, right? Even though it might not be the best thing that they're buying these products, we shouldn't be punishing the consumers. We should be punishing the businesses exclusively, right? What do you guys think?
Yeah, definitely. I think that when I was saying that increasing the climate tax, if they were to pay a penalty, that should be I think when I was reading up on it, I'll confess I didn't read up too much on the legal documents because that was way too dry for me to read. But from what I understand, if they are fined something, they cannot inflict that pain across to the consumer. They have to do it. So if they lose that money, they lose that money, and they still have to keep on selling the products or selling these things at the same price. And also, a lot of the companies that do abuse the environment are companies that are like a supply chain, to some extent. They're not the people who are selling us the product. They're the people who make the product, if that makes sense. So even if I think that it can be subsidized because it's over such a large chain, right? So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Any other hands?
We seem to have one from Aaliyah.
Feel free to unmute yourself, Aaliyah.
Hi guys. So in one of the pledges, the Chancellor of Exchequer's Rishi Sunak's budget plans were mentioned, and I know that today, in his recent budget plan for 2021, he made a small reference to increasing spending on sovereign bonds. And I just wanted to ask, how do you feel that yet again the investing in the climate crisis was treated as a footnote rather than held in regard to the importance it has?
I actually listened to the budget as well today, and I did find it really interesting that him and his government are speaking so passionately about the climate, but yet again, as the Conservatives have done multiple times, they aren't taking any tangible action. He put freezers on oil prices as well, so the prices of oil cannot rise. And I think it just goes to show again how the government just isn't doing enough and isn't taking enough physical action, and their words aren't being translated into things that can actually change the world. And I think it's important that we pressure them to do that and make these changes happen.
Thank you, Ariana. I completely agree on that one. Sometimes our government do not take our words seriously, but it is our duty to lobby our government and make sure that change is being made. So that's what we're here for today. We're all here to make those changes, and we're all here voting on issues that we feel as if take priority. So as we move on, anyone else have any more questions? Otherwise we can wrap it up and move to the votes.
Any other questions? Anyone else?
It looks like we don't. So if we move on to the voting, Mariam, if you'd like to go through it, feel free to do so. And I think Ahmed, there you go.
Right, so in front of you we have our first pledge. So to make it compulsory provision to consider the climate in all decisions made. This includes writing climate impact reports before deciding. Now I don't know about you, but I think that this is very important.
So far we have 93%. A bit of a surprise. One person decided to abstain. Perhaps taking after what Hamad had said earlier for the BYC's presentation, but I am not Hamad, neither is Mariam, and we know how to lost convo. Sorry for the short Hamad, just had to put it out there.
No offense.
No offense. No, but at the moment it's going through, looking like a cool 95%. Easy landslide, and yeah, I personally think that this should definitely be the case because think about it, climate change is at the forefront of all our issues, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, as the next generation, as the young people, we will be the ones who will be heavily impacted by the decisions that our government makes, so we should push for the decisions that we believe are the best for our future and are the best for what we can do. So if I was voting, I definitely would vote for it.
100%.
100%. Speaking of 100%, very close to 100% on votes for. If anyone is abstaining, just for the sake of abstaining, and so be it. But if you genuinely abstain on a topic like this, I completely respect your choices. Just to double check, everyone has voted, right? I think so, so we can end the poll there. Also, just a little disclaimer, Ariana put in the chat a little plug to the Kingston and Richmond's Kingston and Richmond Youth Council's Twitter and email address. If you want, you can plug in your Instagram as well. If you want, you know, a little cheeky plug never hurt. So if we could move on to the next pledge.
Right, so our next pledge. Introducing promotional schemes such as 1 day a year, National Car Free Day with free public transport. Now, we actually did a campaign on ensuring that young people under the 18 maintain their Oyster cards, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So under 18s, you know, free travel. We did that. Who did it? Young people.
We did. We did.
London and my piece.
Yeah, you get me. So Don't Zap Does It was an amazing campaign. We used the hashtag similar to see-through plastic. Once again, use it. You can be in a chance of winning however many trees we choose to plant on behalf of your name. And yeah, I feel as if public transport is an amazing way to tackle climate change and lower the emissions of carbon dioxide. It allows people to, you know, have an affordable way of transport as well as helping the environment.
Hey, listen, I want to give you this
people,
book.
Most of us don't know how to drive, so our main form of transport is, you know, the tube, the bus.
Do you have an email address?
Those from London, we've used TFL, you know, religiously.
100%. You know, living in a village-like style area with fields, like travel buses is essential. You know, free public transport is like a lifesaver, honestly. Yeah.
I mean, of course, driving a car is very fun, and hopefully in the coming years I'll learn how to drive a car. But
if you can reach the steering wheel with that height.
Oh, is that what we're doing, Mario? Okay.
That's mad. You're moving mad.
Okay. I feel like that was a bit of vengeance for what I did to Lashini, and I tried drawing out Lashini. But you know. Okay, now moving swiftly on, I think everyone has voted 83% for, 11% against, then 6% abstain. So yeah, the pledge passes smoothly with a cool 83%.
Cool. So our next one, so to spend more money on initiatives to tackle the effects of climate change, such as flooding barriers.
So I don't know about any of you guys, but I am a reliability student, and we learn about the importance of things such as flood barriers and seawalls in the response to things that are, you know, usually triggered by climate change, tsunamis, cyclones, and a bunch of what's the word we use in geography? Meteorological hazards. So, you know, I feel as if it's very important for not only the UK and high-income countries to, you know, spend more money on initiatives to tackle the effects of climate change, but it's also important for the HICs to help LICs in ensuring that countries such as the Philippines, Bangladesh, countries in what's the word? Oh yeah, in danger because of climate change. They should be the ones who should be receiving the help, and as HICs, we should be the one giving them the help. So, you know the saying, if you give, you shall receive, and, you know, it's the way the world works. You treat people the way you want to be treated, and, you know, hopefully we can lobby the government in ensuring that initiatives are taken not only in the UK to save the River Thames, but also in places like the Philippines, where they face meteorological hazards and volcanic hazards on a regular basis.
I think that like these flooding barriers are really essential for those like not just near London as well, but you know up north. I believe it was like last year, was it, where we saw flooding, and it was essential that like this doesn't stay exclusively to London. You know, and like we do ensure that this actually gets out there to other regions in England and in the UK generally. And even with the transportation in the last in our last, what's it called, our last pledge, that's it, to ensure that it's not just exclusive to London, but we ensure that our message gets out for the whole UK. I think that's something key that we all like want to highlight in this process.
One misconception of meditation is
So
that
I
if you
think
meditate,
everyone
your mind will be blank.
has voted on this topic. So if we'd like to move on to the next pledge, you know, passing over a casual 90% for. Next one.
So to introduce climate tax on corporations.
So this one had a few questions about it, but I'll let Mariam say what she has to say, and then I'll say two bits here and there.
For me personally, not putting any like pressure on you guys, but I'm 100% for this actually. I do believe that climate tax is a really like a strong way, an impactful way to actually get like businesses to actually look at what they're doing and see like if they are causing that huge damage, that they need to deal with it and they can't just carry on going as they please.
I completely agree with Mariam on this one. I said this before when I was hosting the news to reuse on to do with sustainable fashion, but it's important that TNCs from high-income countries understand the importance of the environment. So, you know, introducing climate tax will ensure that they don't, you know, exploit less developed countries when it comes to things such as relaxed environmental laws and, you know, just finding a cheaper way out of things, you know what I mean? And yes, there's the concern of the consumers will be the ones to, you know, lose out because the prices will reduce immediately. Like if my Primark stocks increase in price, of course I'm going to be angry, but at the end of the day, it's all for the environment, it's all for our future. Consumers should understand that we should all take initiatives to make that the main priority, and I think this is one we should ensure that maintains this and ensure the future of all. There you go, 100% Mariam Des in the chat, even though she is a co-host and could back me on this one. But nevertheless, we move swiftly on. I hope everyone's enjoying the day, by the way. You know, it's been a long event. It's been tiresome. You know, my throat's getting a bit dry. Big 2-liter bottle by the side of me to make sure that I stay hydrated. So yeah, are those all the pledges for the Kingston and Richmond Youth Council? If not,
yes, they are.
There you go. So swiftly on, we shall pass on to Kaina to introduce Teach the Future. So Kaina and Maggie, I think it is, go ahead, take the floor.
Hi everyone, so my name is Kaina and I'm here with my co-host Maggie. I'd like to take this to introduce us, thank you, to host the end of this event for you all. So thank you all for being here with us today. Like Tay said, it's been quite a long day. We've had some amazing speakers and you know, we're making a real big change here today. So before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to make sure I'm using this last opportunity to plug all our socials in there, to make sure you guys are following our Instagram at London MYPs and also following the Mental Health Charter and the amazing work going on there, and using the hashtag #SeeThroughPlastic. So, a big welcome to our last, but certainly not least, speakers from Teach the Future, which is an inclusive, well-organised and persistent campaign by secondary and tertiary education students to greatly improve education on the climate emergency and ecological crisis in the UK. They will be presenting how the government needs to commit to education strategies to ensure a greener future. So over to you, our speakers from Teach the Future.
Amazing, thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen if that's alright. We've got a presentation. Okay. I've got permission, don't worry. Amazing. There we go, can we all see that? Is that okay? Someone tell me yeah? Amazing, I can see Molly. Thank you so much. Amazing, hello everyone. My name is Jude Daniel Smith, I'm 16. I live in Sheffield, in England. I use he, him pronouns, and I will let Charlie introduce himself as well. We're going to be presenting this today. Charlie, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Charlie, I'm from Community TV Pronouns, and I'm from Bath in, I live just outside of Bath in Wiltshire.
Amazing. So, we are going to be talking about Teach the Future. Thank you so much for the introduction there. That sums up really well. But yeah, Teach the Future is a campaign to repurpose the education system around the climate emergency and ecological crisis to ensure that all young people are enabled to mitigate the climate crisis, because it's the biggest issue that our world has ever faced. And if we aren't taught how to mitigate it, then what are we going to do as we age? So we'll get on with it. Amazing. Perfect. So hopefully you can see the slide. So I want to ask you a big question. Do we have climate education today? Now the answer, you may have guessed, if you've gone through the formal education system, is no. Any mention of climate change in the curriculum at the moment is siloed into geography, which at GCSE level is not compulsory, and the sciences, which is not accessible to all, despite us knowing that the climate crisis is indiscriminate yet disproportionately affecting marginalised communities. In surveys commissioned in 2019 by the UK Student Climate Network, students organising for sustainability and partner organisations, it was found that only 4% of young people feel that they have a good level of knowledge about climate change. 68% of young people really want to learn more about the climate emergency in school, and 75% of teachers do not feel adequately prepared to convey information and teach classes on the climate emergency. I'll pass on to Charlie for the next few slides.
So now we know that the majority of students in the UK don't actually feel that they're properly educated in the climate crisis. What would a comprehensive climate education actually look like, and what will we be able to achieve with that? So with every subject in school being linked to industry, a young person may go into what they've left school, it's critical that climate education is not only a subject that is siloed into either science or geography as we currently see it as, but that it's woven into every available subject like golden thread in the terms of the future, to ensure that we're not only teaching about science and climate change, but also the associated social issues and consequences that are connected to that environmental breakdown. So we're proposing that would be climate justice education and not just climate science education. It would be a mixture of covert and overt teaching, so not just specifically talking about climate change as an environmental issue, but also normalising its discussion by using it as a medical topic when we're doing things like English literature and language topics, having it as a key theme as it is woven for every subject, so we're actually able to talk about it, and it's kind of got a taboo subject that's only spoken about occasionally and only by a few people. And with adequate climate education, we can prepare young people for their futures in an environment working in climate, not only equipping them with the knowledge to mitigate that environmental breakdown, but also with the knowledge to tackle the associated social crises, and be able to live and maintain a green sustainable society in the future. So we believe in Teach the Future that students can't learn about climate change and climate justice in school if their environments they're learning in are in fact contributing to the crisis they're learning about. It's a vicious cycle that you're learning about something in a place that's fueling the crisis that you're learning about that you have to learn about. So we believe that all buildings and public school estates should be carbon neutral by the year 2030 with a couple extra milestones in place that you could define a little bit with our pledges, which would not only allow students to be taught in a carbon neutral environment, but it would also create jobs and extra share funding across the country, as well as assisting the country in reducing our carbon impact.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Charlie. Right, I will explain our pledges to you guys now. So, we would like the government in Westminster, the Welsh Government, the Scottish Government, and the Northern Irish Government to pledge that they will, and this is the first poll, guys, so this is the point that's going to be made on the first poll. We would like them to commission a review into how their respective formal education systems are preparing students for the climate emergency and ecological crisis. Now, it's pretty obvious why we want this, but we effectively want these governments to have a look at their education systems, realise that there is nowhere near enough climate education, and then they can subsequently use that data as a basis to go forward with future policy. So our second pledge is that we would like to include the climate emergency and each ecological crisis in teacher training and introduce a new professional teaching qualification. Now, this links back to that 75% of teachers statistic that we shared earlier on. Now, how are teachers going to teach about the climate crisis if they're not being taught how to teach about the climate crisis? It's a bit of a no-brainer. We can't just expect teachers to, go off and research this in their own time. We need to properly, make an investment and invest in our teachers so that young people do get the climate education that they need. Right, and the next one, this is a little bit tricky. So this is sort of, all of the rest that you're about to see is our third poll. Now these are just some examples of policies that we would like to see enacted that all sort of come under funding and new policy effectively. Longer term policy rather than just a review and a new professional teaching qualification. So, first off, we would like to fund the retrofitting of all educational buildings and schools to be net zero and ensure that all new builds are environmentally sustainable. Charlie mentioned that before. We want all new buildings to do that. We would like all new buildings to start being net zero from 2022, and we would like all current schools to be retrofitted to be net zero by 2030. The next one is we would like to fund a national vocational education scheme to aid in the inclusion of climate change in practical careers leading to greener jobs. We would like a national programme of outdoor education and connection to nature linked to learning about the climate emergency and ecological crisis. I think that was really important. Do you remember those times when you would go out in primary school and you go out into nature and really learn about it? I haven't had that in a good 10 years now. It was really upsetting. But yeah. The next one, and this is a big one, we would like to introduce a National Climate Education Information Institute, that's a mouthful, I apologise, to disseminate scientific information to educators about climate change, its effects and measures of prevention. This will include teaching resources as well as continuous professional development materials so schools can maintain up-to-date knowledge on these issues. Obviously that links into teaching teachers because they're going to need resources for these classes. Next one, we would like to see an establishment of a youth climate endowment fund. Now you guys might know about endowment funds. They're effectively funding schemes that aim to tackle a certain issue. So we've seen a knife crime endowment fund in the UK that aims to tackle knife crime through a variety of different means, and they're all funded by this endowment fund. And we would like to use this endowment fund to fund youth-led climate and environmental social action, enabling students in every educational institution to engage their peers, teachers and parents in practical local action to abate the climate emergency and the ecological crisis. Amazing. Right, that is all of ours. Thank you so much for listening. We really hope you vote for our pledges so that we can continue to lobby the government to introduce comprehensive climate education. Now, obviously, we're going to take questions now, but I will pop our socials and our website in the chat so that you can go and have a look because we've been doing a lot of really good stuff. We started late 2019, really got going in early 2020, and we've been doing a lot of things. We want to show that to you guys. So thank you so much. I'll stop sharing now. Amazing. Bring on the questions.
Alright, thank you so much for that presentation, that was amazing. Bringing us kind of perspective we haven't heard so far tonight, so thank you, that's great. So we heard some great pledges there, and I agree 100%, but I'm sure some people have some questions, so who wants to get the ball rolling with that? Do we have any questions in the chat? Oh, and we have Tifa. Can we get him on the floor, please?
Thank you, Maggie. Just a quick question. There was something being said about getting all schools to be completely green by, what is it, 2030, I think it was? Correct me if I'm wrong. I was just wondering, what are the steps that Teach the Future and your campaign will take in order to ensure and get aboard the government and all schools to follow through and abide by this? Because I think it's an amazing idea, and I think we definitely should strive for that. But what are the steps you guys are looking to take?
So that pledge is kind of split into two different sections. So one of it's for a new piece of legislation to come in under one of our climate education bills, and that would say that all schools have to be built from a carbon neutral standard from 2022 onwards, so reducing the amount of carbon emissions that are kind of released in the construction, and then being able to offset those emissions as well to bring it down to a neutral standard. So gaining funding for the recovery for education, which is a big fiscal stimulus investment that we're asking for the Chancellor, and we did achieve part of that in the last Chancellor's budget, where £1 billion was allocated towards public buildings to be converted to a carbon neutral standard, which has been part kind of contributed through our campaign for that, which allocating to school buildings. So it's about getting the government on side to put funding into making sure that all schools are retrofitted, and then also putting laws in place making sure that they're built as environmentally friendly as possible from next year, for the 2030 target for all schools to reach that same standard.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer. We actually have a question in the chat as well. So it says perhaps there could be an agricultural subject as well, and that could teach people how to grow their own food and then decrease their carbon footprint.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing idea, and funny story about that. I live in Sheffield, which is obviously pretty urban, but if you go out into the Peak District, there are some schools there that actually do have an agriculture GCSE. I've got a friend who's doing it, and he actually says it's his best one that he's done. He's learned about hedgerows, he's learned about growing his own fruit and veg, he's learned about sustainable farming, and yeah, he said it's one of the best GCSEs he's ever done. So yeah, I believe that the mass reintroduction of a qualification like that on a larger scale, especially for people living in urban areas, would definitely be a good thing. And obviously, you know, for people in urban areas who may not have the green spaces, I think that possibly local council funded allotments could be introduced in tandem to that education. Obviously, it's just a simple idea there, you know, not much thought to it, but just a simple idea. But yeah, no, that's a really cool thought. I'll have to sort of share that around. There is an agriculture GCSE. Amazing, thank you.
Funny enough, you should mention that. I actually grew up in Sheffield up until about the age of 7, and I was one of the schools that had the agriculture study from like a really young age. So we all got our own little green little space that we all got to grow our own things in, and it was amazing because we were really young. And ever since then, I've picked up growing food, so I still do it in my back garden.
Amazing.
So that was especially moving to London and just telling my friends that, it was so confused. They're like, "Why do you grow stuff? Just go to Asda." So yeah, I can second you.
Thank you so much for proving me right there. That's really helpful. Yeah, no, amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for that question.
That's great. I wish I had that. Do we have any more questions? Is there anybody else? Come on, we had so many great pledges there. There must be some more questions here. Anybody?
Feel free to pop them in that Q&A or the chat if you don't want to speak.
I'll drop in with a question. So I've got a different point of view on it. So I really like your idea of integrating it into the system. So slowly everything in the world, as it does, has an effect on the climate. So we learn those different elements. And I know last time they talked about a specific climate group. But do you believe there should be a compulsory climate curriculum rather than making the compulsory curriculum climate friendly? So there's those two options. How do you face off, and why is your one better than the other one?
Yeah, so as a campaign we call for the reorientation of the education system around the climate crisis. So we believe that the compulsory curriculum should be converted to a curriculum that's based around the climate. So not only of us having those specific subjects that are currently taught in the curriculum that is, because we've seen through our research that students are being failed for lack of kind of climate education and their ability to be prepared for their future. So we think that every subject should have mandatory aspects on sustainability and climate justice, as well as the creation of new subjects as well where they're necessary, but predominantly making sure that every subject kind of has that level of climate education as a base.
Okay, that is amazing, and I think, just to keep on time, I think we will move on to the votes, if that's alright. So can we have our first poll up, please?
I think there was a question in the chat. I will answer it on the chat.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
I'm happy to answer that in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, if we're having an answer in the chat, we've got our first poll going. So this is the poll on whether we should introduce the review into the education systems into how we should educate on the climate. Which honestly, I have to agree with you there. I really think there is nothing that is told at all that really should be. But yeah, you really just don't hear enough about it in schools in any kind of formal way. So yeah, of course, I do support this one myself. Get a few more votes in. The lo-fi music might encourage some people to vote. Okay, I think we'll call it there, and we've got 96% for the motion, so I think that is great, and that is passed. So can we have the next one?
Ooh, looks like we're having some technical difficulty. Let's see what's going on with our polls. I found it really interesting that they, oh, there we go.
Meet the Mazda SUV range, including the highly acclaimed CX-5 and the CX-30.
I think it was really important when they were speaking about how, you know, climate only ever comes up in geography or in science. So today we were doing a little bit about it, and it was actually funny that my teacher actually just skipped through it and said, you know, read up on it by yourself, but let's move on to the other bits. And, you know, me saying, no, I want to hear about it. And because we were talking about water disposal and, you know, like other things in our systems. And it was really shocking, like, when you said that teachers don't get enough, you know, information about it themselves. They don't understand how important it is.
Yeah, that's really interesting you could say that, but then like in those situations, I almost sort of feel bad for those teachers because I know that most would want to talk about it, but you know they don't want to spread information because they haven't been taught properly about it, or you know they wouldn't want to. I don't know. I guess they wouldn't want to just provide an education which isn't up to their standard in the topic that they've been taught about. But yeah, no, absolutely. I've had that conversation too many times, especially my geography teacher.
Yeah, 100%. I was wondering, Magic, because you're at university, are you still getting that type of information, or is it just completely gone?
No, it's completely up to you. I think it's so, yeah, no, it's really poor. They could be doing so much more for that, honestly. And yeah, it really is just up to the little graphics on Instagram to educate everyone, I think.
I mean, I don't know if you guys mind, but I think another problem that comes in when it comes to teaching